Hello and welcome to yet another video. This is the 10th episode of the story in which Naruto is adopted at a young age. How far can he go if someone actually supports him? How will he influence the elemental nations? This story is from a writing bunny. Please support him, her. Please like and subscribe to show your support. Let's get the show started. Outskirts of Shimo. Now this is one mission I'd rather omit from my resume, Hataru muttered through clenched teeth as Hana was working on her injured leg. Why? Naruto asked. He had returned to his real appearance and he couldn't help but feel immensely relieved. The itching on his cheeks had been slowly driving him crazy. It was even worse than the pain in his shoulder. The Kyuubi's healing factor was still mending. We beat a jounin or two. I'm not sure how good the second guy was. But beating up jounin wasn't in our mission description, the purple-haired Kunoichi pointed out. We were supposed to find out what the daimyo was up to. I spied on his meeting, Naruto reminded her. And did you find out his plans? The girl asked. Well, no, he admitted, but he is definitely up to something. I don't think that's enough, Hataru said. Well, it probably isn't, but at least the daimyo, I forgot his name again, at least he now knows for certain there's something up. And we can go back and try to find out more, the boy suggested. Naruto, Hataru spoke slowly, I've heard many stupid ideas from you, but this one takes the prize. The two ninja certainly weren't alone and the city is now on full alert. There will be others after our hide soon. We're stopping now only so we can run faster afterwards. So don't tell me we should go back now. Maybe nobody would expect us to do something so stupid and won't look for us there. She shot him an incredulous look. Maybe not. Forget it. I got carried away. So when are we going again? As soon as Hataru can run again, Hana answered. I'm almost finished healing her wound. We should be glad it wasn't even worse. It's pretty bad as it is, Hataru remarked. I wonder what kind of diplomatic incident we caused today. At least it's just some frost country, Naruto said. It's pretty far from Konoha. Whatever comes out of this, it shouldn't concern us. We can only hope that you're right. Fields close to Shimo, a dog whined. We picked a tail, his mistress announced. Already? Naruto sighed. I'm more surprised it took them that long, Hataru remarked. We spent a long time getting ourselves back into shape. How many are there? Naruto asked. 3, I think, Hana answered after a short growled conference with her familiars. That's good, since there are 3 of us as well, the boy smiled. Yes, but there's no way I can tell how strong they are, Hana replied. Well. At least we aren't outnumbered. The boy tried to keep a positive outlook on things. For a while they ran in silence, Hana and the Haimaru siblings occasionally sniffing the air. They're catching up to us, the Inuzuka announced. Shall we try to outrun them? Naruto suggested. I can't go any faster, Hataru shook her head. My leg still hurts. So we'll have to fight again, the boy concluded. Yes, Hana agreed. But this time we can prepare. On a dirt road Hibiki stopped in his tracks. Suddenly, one of his teammates bumped into him. Watch out, Nobiru, Hibiki admonished him. And you don't stop for nothing, Nobiru grumbled. I think he has a reason, Kotone, their other teammate, interrupted. You're right, Hibiki nodded. Look at the tracks. They're turning right here. Then why don't we turn too? Nobiru asked. Look there, Hibiki pointed ahead. It's faint, but there's a footprint. I think they are trying to shake us by creating a false trail. So we're going forward, Nobiru stated, already making a step. Hibiki caught him. Not so fast. I'm not sure which one of these trails is the decoy. Decide fast, Kotone said. They're getting away from us. We won't catch them if we pick the wrong trail, Hibiki pointed out. Can't we just split? Nobiru suggested. Do you think you can take on them alone? Kotone asked sarcastically. I'm strong, Nobiru boasted. Not like a certain somebody. Can't you shout any louder? Hibiki chastised him. If they didn't know we were after them, now they certainly do. Can't you finally decide on a trail? Nobiru complained. They'll go away if we'll spend the night here. Well, I think they went left, Hibiki decided. Left? But there's no trail, Kotone pointed out. That's it, Hibiki explained. Both of those trails are obviously false. That means they went somewhere else. They're ninja. They're deceptive. Right? Wrong, a voice said behind them. They whirled around and stared into the darkness, searching for its source. That's why their eyes were wide open when the flash tag went off, blinding all three of them. They heard kunai whistling through the air. They couldn't see it, but they could hear it went wide. Hibiki threw a handful of shuriken in the general direction he thought the kunai had come from. Before they could land, an explosive tag went off around the kunai handle, knocking the three of them to the ground. Then the darkness spat out the attackers. Kotone was stabbed with a kunai to her neck before she could get up from the ground. Hibiki managed to block the first strike, but then sharp teeth bit into his leg. He cried out in pain. He didn't even see the second strike coming. Nobiru put up the best fight. He had just enough time to blow his special whistle, whose sound made his opponent lose his sense of balance and fall to his knees. Then he kicked and knocked the attacker away. His victory was short-lived. The boy's teammates were on him before he could say, crap. One well-aimed kick relieved him of his whistle. The last thing he knew were a dog's fangs sinking into his throat. That was easy, Hataru observed. Almost like killing civilians. I really expected them to put up a better fight, Hana mused. We only wasted an explosive note. What was that sound? Naruto asked, getting from the ground. It somehow upset your inner ear, the vet explained. I was far enough from it and I felt queasy. So what now? This light show must have attracted attention, Hataru remarked. Yes, we should get away soon, the clan heiress agreed, but first we'll have to take care of the bodies. Do we have the time for that? Naruto questioned. There's a moat over there. Let's just dump them there, the dog mistress decided. But first let's take their equipment. That strange Hittite again, Naruto spoke, studying Nobiru's headband. I expected them to be from Kumo, but there's the strange note instead. You're right, Hataru commented. I wonder what that means, but something tells me it's nothing good. And you're not the only one, Hana frowned. Let's take them with us. Too bad we can't take the bodies too. Sorry, my sealing skills still need some work, Naruto grimaced. Now stop talking and let's hurry. Do I have to remind you we're in trouble here? Daimyo's compound Daimyo Fusatsuka was in a really, really bad mood. Not only he didn't get enough sleep during the night, but the festival had just turned into a disaster and he was swarmed with damage reports and petitions from various merchants complaining about insufficient public security and demanding compensation for their destroyed goods. And they were no small sums. He was convinced that they all added at least one extra zero to every amount, but there was no way he could prove it. He sighed and rubbed his temples. Not only there was the real material damage, there was also the blow to his reputation. Once the Hot Springs Country daimyo heard about this, he could just imagine him rolling on the floor with laughter. This image only served to infuriate him further. He took the scroll he was reading and threw it across the room. It flew through the air, hit the paper shoji door and tore a hole through the priceless 100-year-old painting adorning it. He scowled. That incident was causing him more and more trouble. Damn those ninja. Have they ever heard about the word restraint? He seriously doubted it. At least the square had been deserted, so there weren't other victims than Katsumi. There was a tap on the door and a servant poked her head inside. "What is it?" he snapped. "There's a messenger for you," the maid snapped. "Another one?" It was all he could do not to groan. He really could do without any more complainers. But he couldn't kick anyone out, more bad publicity was another thing he could do without. "Send him in," he commanded. The door slipped fully open and in walked a girl. He immediately noted that she was a pretty thing, with her pale skin, gray eyes and shiny platinum blonde hair, and it improved his mood somewhat. Pity she was too young for his tastes. "So what message do you bear?" he asked. She pulled a small scroll from her sleeve. "My master sends you this," she said, offering the message to him. He took it and read through its contents. It contained references to yesterday's disaster meeting. So she was from K. At the end of the message, there was one question. "Do you accept?" Yesterday, he had been hesitant. The whole enterprise was quite risky. But now, things had changed a lot since yesterday. He took his brush and wrote one word into the scroll before handing it back to the girl. "Take it back to your master," he commanded. She bowed deeply and left. Once he was alone again, he had no more mind for the petitions. For a moment, he wondered whether he had made the right decision, but then he squashed the doubts. Once he had taken the step, there was no going back. And if he wanted to follow through with it, he had a lot of work to do. He could only hope he hadn't just made a deal with the devil. Konoha, they made it. They considered it a miracle and neither of them was sure how did they accomplish it, but they all returned home in one piece. They had to fight a lone ninja that had located them and hide from a large patrol. They somehow made it to a small port town and took a ship to Fire Country, all the way worrying that somebody was going to find and sink them. When their ship docked in Port City, they jumped down on the pier and kissed the soil of their homeland. Especially Hotaru, who had gotten seasick. Then they ran to Konoha at top travel speed. They couldn't help but worry that somebody had followed them and would attack any minute. Once they walked through the gates, they realized that the worst part of the mission was still before them. They had to explain the fiasco to the Hokage. Saying that Sarutobi wasn't happy would be an understatement. Fortunately, he didn't think it was entirely their fault either. Their mission was marked as failure, but they were commended for bringing the 3 strange headbands. Then they were dismissed. Hotaru headed for the hospital to have her leg checked over and Hana went to the Inuzuka clan compound to treat her one injured dog. Naruto walked straight home. He hoped Tenzo would be finally back. He hadn't seen his guardian in what felt like a very long time. But he was out of luck. Tenzo still wasn't home. Hokage's office, so where's the fire, sensei, a tall, ridiculously dressed white-haired man asked instead of greeting the moment he climbed through the window. "I almost caught up to Tsunadeheim just before I got your letter." "Then why didn't you bring her with you?" Sarutobi asked. "You said you wanted to see me in an urgent matter," Jiraiya answered. "I didn't say it was that urgent," the Hokage pointed out. "Well, she gave me the slip," the spymaster admitted. "You know how she is." "I do," Sarutobi sighed. "So what's the matter?" "Lots of things are the matter. Sit down and I'll explain." Some time later the Hokage finished his explanation. The Toad Sage rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "So let me get this straight, you want me to fix whatever is wrong with Naruto's seal, find Tsunade and investigate the origins of these headbands, all at the same time?" "That's about it," the elderly man nodded. "Geez, sensei, you certainly know how to make us busy," Jiraiya remarked. "This is no small task." "And you're no ordinary ninja," Sarutobi pointed out. "Or do you say this is more than you can do?" "I never said that," the Toad Sage grinned. "After all, I'm one of your best." Training grounds. Naruto was systematically demolishing a training post. The last mission had reminded him just how important his training was. Even if it pained him, he had always known that his chances against a Jounin were slim, and the recent happenings showed him that he might run into one literally anywhere. And he might not be armed when it happened. That was why he was practicing his new technique. Once he mastered it, there would be no more unarmed for him. He would be able to turn his arms into deadly weapons anytime. He concentrated on the flow of the wind chakra around his forearms and punched. He took a step backwards to examine his results. There was a good chunk of the wood missing. Naruto sighed. He was improving, but it wasn't as fast as he'd like to. He still could hold the jutsu going only for a short time, and he tended to lose his grip on it whenever something startled him. He reactivated the blades and tried again. "That's an interesting jutsu you have there," a male voice stated right behind him. He whirled around, automatically assuming the on-guard position. He had no idea there was someone behind him until he spoke. He was usually quite good at detecting others' presences, but that stranger got a drop on him. If it had been an enemy, he would have been already dead. "Not bad reflexes," the newcomer observed. Naruto didn't respond, instead surveying him carefully. His first impression was that the man was tall. Very tall. His second impression was that he had absolutely no fashion sense. The green part of his clothes wasn't so bad, but the red vest was outrageous. And who in their right mind wore geta anyway? How was he even able to walk in them? And let's not get even started on his hair. Such a long ponytail must be getting in the way constantly. "Who are you?" Naruto asked cautiously. "Who am I?" the stranger echoed. "You don't know who I am?" He sounded slightly offended. "No," Naruto shook his head. "I'll let you know, little one, I am famous far and wide, the great sage of Myobokuzen, the charmer of ladies everywhere, and the author of the most famous book ever, the one and only Jiraiya-sama." The man did a funny dance and whipped a familiar-looking orange book from his pocket before striking what he must have considered a cool pose. Naruto's eyes narrowed. "It's that book," he shouted. "Don't tell me you're the one writing that." "I am," Jiraiya boasted. "You know my work?" "Well, why do I even ask? Everybody does." "So are you a big fan?" "No," Naruto shouted, turning red. The images from his undercover mission were still too vivid in his mind. "I'll never read this trash." "Never." "My books aren't trash," the porn writer protested. "They are the finest pieces of literature. Men everywhere agree." "Perverts," Naruto grimaced. He still couldn't get the sight of Daimyo Fusatsuka from his mind. "And you're the biggest one." "Yes, a super pervert," Jiraiya nodded with a smile. "That's just what I am." "And you're not even ashamed of it," the young Chunin scoffed. "Why ever should I be?" The white-haired man looked genuinely puzzled. "It's quite a feat. Do you have any idea what hardships I have to go through on regular basis to gather the necessary research for my books?" "I don't want to know," Naruto answered with a shudder. "Well," Jiraiya looked a bit downcast, "maybe you're still too young to appreciate my genius properly. But give it a few years." "No," the boy yelled. "Never." "You won't be so convinced when you grow up," the man insisted. "I doubt it," Naruto stood his ground. "Anyway, is there a reason you came to bother me? You didn't interrupt my training just to show off your book, did you?" "No, of course not," the self-proclaimed super pervert answered. "I wouldn't waste my precious time on a little brat who cannot appreciate my genius. There are so many sights to see, hot springs to visit, ladies to peep on." "Pervert," the blonde scowled. "Get to the point or get out. Didn't anyone ever tell you not to be rude to your elders?" Jiraiya scowled back. "You're a pervert," Naruto pointed out. "You don't count." Brat, I already told you I'm not a pervert but a super pervert, the older man corrected him. Whatever. The Chunin realized that there was no point in arguing with this one. So what did you want? In case you couldn't see, I was busy training here. Yes, I noticed, Jiraiya nodded. Let me tell you, that is a very interesting technique you have there. I've never seen it before. Thank you, Naruto smiled. I created it myself. He was proud at his accomplishment and always welcomed any praise, even if it came from old perverts. Is that so? Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. Then maybe you are worth my time. And just what is that supposed to mean? Naruto frowned. Oh, didn't I tell you? The man looked surprised. No, the boy shook his head. I'm going to be training you, he announced. You? Naruto looked at him dubiously. The man looked nothing like a ninja, but then, he was able to move stealthily. Yes, me, Jiraiya confirmed. But you're just a huge pervert. Naruto shouted. Boy, didn't I already tell you? I'm the great sage of Mount Myobokuzen, the famous Jiraiya-sama. Something clicked in Naruto's head. His eyes widened. Jiraiya as in Jiraiya of the Sannin? Yes, the man in question grinned, that's me. Didn't you get it the first time? I thought it was a coincidence, Naruto answered. Jiraiya of the Sannin is a great ninja. You're a great pervert. Your point? The Gamma Sannin raised an eyebrow. Naruto remained silent. He looked at Jiraiya carefully. He could now tell that the man was muscular under his ridiculous attire and he noticed several bulges in his clothes that might or might not conceal hidden weapons. And he was able to get a drop on him. Reluctantly, he had to admit that under the goofy exterior the man could be a good ninja. Let's say I believe you, he said. Why are you offering? Oh, that wasn't an offer, that was an order, Jiraiya corrected. Sensei told me you've been having some trouble with your little fuzzy friend. I'm here to find a solution. You can? Naruto couldn't keep the eagerness from his voice. The image of the foreign ninja torn in half haunted his dreams ever since. If anyone can, it's me. The greatest seal master in Konoha, at least since Minato died. Jiraiya's eyes were filled with a faraway look. Well, let me see your seal. Sure. Naruto was excited. He still wasn't convinced he should trust this Jiraiya, but he was desperate for anything that would solve his problem with the Kyuubi. And if the man was really as good as he was. Jiraiya spent a long time examining the design on his stomach. I can't see anything wrong with it, he said. No? Naruto was dejected. Tell me everything about your problem, the Toad Sage commanded. So Naruto did. I've never heard about anything like that before, the Sannin commented when he finished. But then your seal is unique, so everything about it is the first time. So are you able to help? Naruto inquired. I believe so, but it will take time, Jiraiya replied. You'll have to come with me. Come with you, the Chunin questioned. To where? Wherever I go, Jiraiya shrugged. I have other duties, you know, and they consist mainly of information gathering. So you'll be going on a trip with me. A trip with the self-proclaimed super pervert? Just great, Naruto muttered sarcastically. Do you want my help or not? The aforementioned pervert asked. I do, Naruto admitted, but I don't know if I can go. Of course you can. Sensei already agreed to it. Go pack your things. We'll be leaving tomorrow. Tenzo's apartment. Naruto was packing his things. He had already informed his teammates about his departure. Both of them were sad about the separation, but they wished him luck. They both agreed that a solution for his problem was a high priority. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were also relieved they would be looking for it somewhere far away. It stung a bit, but he understood their feelings. He too was scared about what might happen if he lost control again. The door creaked open. Naruto turned around to see who was coming. His face brightened in a wide grin when he recognized the newcomer. "Tenzo," he exclaimed. "You're back. And it looks like you're just leaving," his caretaker replied. "Yes," Naruto nodded, a bit downcast. "So much happened. Care to tell me about it?" the Jounin inquired. "Sure." They spent the evening talking. Naruto told all about his latest mission, his work on his new jutsu and his upcoming trip with Jiraiya. Tenzo told about the time he spent at the front lines and the skirmishes he had fought in. They went out and had dinner at Ichiraku's, exchanging stories with Tuchi and Ayam. It was a much happier Chunin who embarked on the road the next day. "On the road, that jutsu of yours is really interesting," Jiraiya remarked watching his young companion train. "It's quite unusual to use the whirling motion of chakra." 3 days had passed since they left Konoha and they'd spent them traveling. Jiraiya would occasionally stop to talk to a seemingly random person, and in the evenings he would study Naruto's seal and the red line and scribble something in his notebook. Oh, and he would also ogle every pretty girl they came across, but it wasn't as bad as Naruto had feared. It seemed that even the super pervert could be serious when the occasion called for it. "So I've noticed," Naruto replied, remembering his long, fruitless search in the library. "But it's highly effective." "That it is," the Sannin agreed, "but I can't help but notice you having trouble." "It's just a matter of concentration," the whiskered boy replied. "I'll just have to train more and I'll improve." "It seems to be slow going, though," the Toad Sage observed. "Don't I know," Naruto sighed. "Hey, boy," Jiraiya said after a moment of consideration. "What about you'll take a break from this and I'll show you another jutsu?" "You'll show me your jutsu?" Naruto exclaimed with eyes alight. "It's not really mine," the Sannin admitted, "but you'll like it. And there's no one else left alive who can teach you this." "Great," the Chunin exclaimed. "So what is it?" "Watch." Jiraiya extended his hand, palm upwards. A swirl of chakra appeared above it, quickly concentrating into a ball. Naruto watched with rapt fascination as he slammed it into a nearby tree trunk. There was a loud crackling sound and splinters flew everywhere. Jiraiya let his arm fall. A hole through the wood was revealed. "Cool," whispered Naruto wide-eyed. "See?" the white-haired man grinned. "I said you'd like it." The Chunin didn't reply. He was staring intently at his palm, trying to form a whirl of chakra above it. Jiraiya was surprised as how well he was doing, but it was far from well done. For once the shape was completely off. "Whoa, boy, not so fast," he said. Naruto looked at him. "There are proper steps to the training. Let's start with the first one." He tossed a water ball and Naruto caught it. "What's with that?" The boy eyed the thing curiously. It appeared to be a regular toy. "That's the first step. You have to pop it. Look." The balloon in Jiraiya's hand bulged and exploded. "Now it's your turn." Naruto nodded, and the next moment the ball fell apart in ribbons. "What did you do?" the Toad Sage asked. "Popped the ball," the boy replied. "No," Jiraiya shook his head, "you shredded it. That isn't the same as popping." "Let me guess, you used wind chakra." "Yes," Naruto nodded. "That's wrong," the older man replied. "The Rasengan uses purely neutral chakra." "Why?" the child frowned. "Wouldn't it be more potent using wind?" "It would," Jiraiya agreed, "if you could make it work. The Rasengan is the highest level shape manipulation. The chakra in it is concentrated to the max. The Yondaime tried for years to add element to it and failed. Changing your chakra into an element while maintaining the concentration necessary for the Rasengan is impossible." "Why didn't he start with wind then?" Naruto questioned. What? The Gamma Sennin looked puzzled. Why didn't he start with turning his chakra into wind and then manipulating in the proper shape, the Chunin elaborated. Even if he did, there would be still the problem of manipulating both the element and shape at the same time to such a high degree, Jiraiya answered. Why? Naruto didn't understand. Didn't you hear me the first time? I did, the boy answered, but I don't understand why it is such a problem. Wind chakra is more potent than neutral. There's no need to keep it so concentrated to do the same amount of damage. Well, Jiraiya scratched his head, that's something that requires more research. Unfortunately, I'm not a wind type. But I am, Naruto replied. I can do it. Sure, but first learn the Rasengan properly. Here's another ball. It didn't pop as easily as the first. Town once again, Jiraiya had left to talk with a shady-looking shopkeeper, leaving Naruto to his own devices. The young Chunin was currently wandering the marketplace, taking in the sights, sounds and smells. It was refreshing to be just another face in the crowd. Even though the hateful glares in Konoha had diminished over the years, people still tended to look at him oddly. But here nobody knew who he was. As he was enjoying his freedom, he almost failed to notice Jiraiya's approach. But as soon as he spotted him, he could tell something was wrong. The Sannin's usual goofy grin seemed forced. For another person it would be hard to notice, but Naruto had some personal experience with faking expressions of happiness. He was just opening his mouth to ask what was wrong, when the older man beat him to it. We're going, he commanded. Naruto followed him without a word. He had never heard the Toad Sage being so serious. So what's wrong? He asked once they had left the settlement behind. That's what I'd like to find out, Jiraiya replied. I've just heard foreign shinobi were spotted nearby. Which ones? The Chunin asked. He couldn't help but feel excited. Were they perhaps from that unknown village with the musical note they were looking for? My contact didn't know. They spent the afternoon searching through the forests. Naruto was contemplating what shinobi could be at such a location. They weren't that far from the places he had traveled through with his team on the way to Frost Country. They were still in the Fire Country, but close to the borders with Hot Springs Country. It was a remote rural area and Naruto didn't know what anybody would want there. Even the trade routes between Fire and Lightning countries were further north. They were almost ready to call it a day, when Naruto spotted something. Hey, what's that? He pointed at the northern horizon. Where? Jiraiya looked. There, the smoke, Naruto elaborated. Oh that? The man shrugged. Somebody's cooking dinner. But it's big, the boy pointed out. You can see that? Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. It's almost dark. Yes, I can, the Jinchuriki nodded. I could always see well in the darkness. Then let's check it out, the Sannin decided and jumped through the treetops, Naruto at his heels. As they were nearing it, Jiraiya frowned and his frown was deepening. Though the night was falling rapidly, it was now apparent that the smoke wasn't from a kitchen fire. Something much bigger was burning. And if he remembered correctly, the only thing big enough in that location was. Hey, what's that? Naruto's voice interrupted his thoughts. The young Chunin was pointing at something in the undergrowth. Jiraiya stopped. The leaves and small branches were clearly broken and there was a darker stain visible. He brushed away the bushes, revealing what was concealed underneath. It was a body dressed in shinobi outfit. You have good eyes, Jiraiya commended. I would have missed it. I smelled the blood, the demon vessel admitted. So where is he from? Could he be from the mysterious village? No, Jiraiya shook his head. Look again. Now Naruto noticed what the older man was talking about. The ninja was from Konoha. Who did it? He asked. I don't know, Jiraiya frowned, but... What? Naruto prompted. That smoke, that's where a small outpost is. That's bad, Naruto grimaced. Let's go. Once again they took to the trees. They noticed a couple more bodies before reaching the tiny fortress, or what was left of it. Somebody had burned it thoroughly. Naruto's breath caught in his throat. He had seen war before, but here they were far from the front lines. There weren't supposed to be any enemies here. Do you think they are still here? Naruto whispered. No, the Sannin shook his head. I can't detect any chakra signature. Shall we pursue them? The Chunin proposed. They just took out a whole outpost, Jiraiya reminded. A small one, but still. There are only 2 of us. So you figure. So what are we going to do? Naruto asked. Look for clues, the man answered, what else? They split up and searched the smoking ruin. Most of the bodies they discovered belonged to Konoha Shinobi, but one was foreign. Kumo, Jiraiya stated when he saw it. What does it mean? Naruto asked. He had the sinking feeling that he already knew. War. Burnt Outpost. Jiraiya sent a message to the Hokage via one of his toad summons. Naruto stared at it wide-eyed, but without his usual enthusiasm. The knowledge that a new enemy was entering. The war and that it might be his fault, again, for screwing up the mission sent his thoughts straight into depression. The Gamma Sennin seemed to pick on his mood. Hey, kid, don't be so down, he laid a hand on Naruto's shoulder. If they wanted to join the war, they would have done it no matter what you did. It made the boy feel slightly better. And now that you're done feeling sorry for yourself, we're going after them. But you've said. The boy began, but the old man interrupted him. That there are too many to fight? Don't be ridiculous. I'm the Toad Sage, he reminded him, I can take on them. And besides, we aren't going to get caught. It didn't take them long to determine that the attackers left the same way they arrived. They followed their trail through the darkness towards the hot springs country. Why didn't they move forward? Naruto wondered. There wasn't anything else blocking them that way. They weren't supposed to move forward, Jiraiya replied. They were ordered only to destroy the stronghold and retreat. But why? To clear the path, the white-haired man explained. Now there is nothing to block the main force once it comes. Even so, shouldn't it be better if they moved forward as scouts? The blonde boy questioned. They were wounded and tired from the battle, Jiraiya pointed out. The army has more scouts. Naruto nodded, but he still looked troubled. But if they are clearing the path for an army, doesn't it mean they're going to come this way? The Chunin asked. It does, the Sannin confirmed. Aren't you worried we'll run into them? We'll be careful. Naruto still wasn't convinced, but he understood that his opinion amounted to nothing. They set on the road again. Hot Springs Country. Jiraiya had told Naruto to relax, but it wasn't as easy as it sounded. After the events of the previous day, the blonde found it extremely hard to be anything else than anxious or tired. They had spent the night running through the trees, following the trail of the attack team. Then suddenly Jiraiya stopped and claimed they couldn't go any further. Naruto didn't see any reason for it, but he trusted the Sannin to know what he was doing. The Gamma Sennin summoned several smaller toads and sent them forward as scouts. He didn't wait for their return and headed away in a perpendicular direction. When Naruto asked where they were going, he replied that there was nothing else they could do there and they were heading into a nearby town to rest. Naruto was glad to hear it. He really needed to rest. They arrived into the town mid-morning. Jiraiya booked them into an inn and told his young apprentice to catch some rest. He then left, claiming he was going to gather more information, but Naruto noticed the lecherous leer he was shooting towards the local onsen. He didn't point it out. He was too tired to argue. He lay onto bed and closed his eyes, but sleep was avoiding him. The events of the night were still too fresh in his mind. He kept seeing the destroyed fortress and couldn't help but imagine that the Kumo army was going to appear any minute. Every footsteps coming near the room sounded like an enemy ninja approaching, even though he knew it wasn't so. If there really was an enemy shinobi, he wouldn't be able to hear them so easily, if at all. Just as he almost managed to convince himself that there was nobody out to kill him tonight and he could really sleep, a loud explosion rocked the town. Naruto wasn't surprised that it came from the direction of the onsen. Hokage's office Sarutobi was massaging his temples, only barely suppressing the urge to bang his head on the table. As if the war against IWA and AIM wasn't enough, one of Jiraiya's toads arrived recently to inform him that Kumo decided to join the fray. Then a messenger bird arrived from Hot Springs Country saying that they were being attacked, and it sounded like there were two attackers, Kumo and Ricefield Country. And then another bird came, this time from Kumo. It informed him that they realized that the body of the Hyuga who had killed their diplomat was fake, and it took them only 6 years to find out, great job, and that they were declaring war on them. Open declaration meant only one thing: the army was already on its way. He had to act quickly if he didn't want them to knock on Konoha's gate within a week. Fortunately, the Leaf still had plenty of reserves. He quickly scribbled some orders and sent his ANBU to deliver them. He could only hope that it would be enough. Hot Springs Country Naruto was on his feet before the echoes of the explosion quieted down. He grabbed his pouch, he hadn't bothered to undress, strapped it on and ran towards the source of the disturbance. What if Jiraiya needed his help? He didn't realize how absurd that notion was. Locating Jiraiya was easy, the column of smoke was telltale. He was immensely relieved to see the Toad Sage unharmed. What happened? He asked, scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. Some young moron, the white-haired man replied. He thought throwing around exploding tags was a good idea. Well, he won't be throwing them anymore. What are we going to do? Leave, the Toad Sage replied. I see you've already packed. Good, because I don't know when are we going to stop. Konoha, will this never end? Hataru wondered aloud as they stood close to Konoha's gates, waiting for the signal to head out. They were one of the teams sent to deal with the new threat from Kumo. She couldn't help but think about their latest mission and whether there was something they could have done to prevent it. She knew that there probably wasn't, but she still couldn't stop wondering. I hope not, Hana replied. It's been going on long enough. It barely began, Tenzo corrected her. It's going to be a long time before it ends. Yes, the Inuzuka replied, but I can always dream. It was nice to have their sensei back. With him they didn't have the responsibility for every decision and didn't have to worry so much about messing up. But their team wasn't complete. Naruto was off somewhere and they had no idea when, or if, they were going to see him again. Hataru wondered whether he knew about the Kumo's invasion and whether they might perhaps meet him there. So you are going too? A scathing voice interrupted the team's reunion. Hana slowly turned around. Sure enough, standing there was Takiko, her face twisted in an ugly sneer, as was her customary expression whenever speaking to the Inuzuka heiress. Yes, the dog mistress replied evenly, and nice to see you too. Good. Maybe you're going to die there like you deserve for leaving Takeda to die, the sister of her former teammate said. There you are, a boy in green came running towards her. Oboro-sensei wasn't happy with you running off on us. We're about to hit the road. It's not like I got lost, Noriaki, Takiko snapped. I was just talking to an old acquaintance. I see, Noriaki sighed. Can't you forget your grudge for the time being? We're all on the same side here, in case you forgot. I didn't, the kunoichi answered. But I'm not sure about her, she has a habit of abandoning her teammates. Look, she's missing one again. She does not, Hataru interjected. And shouldn't you return to your team? We're about to leave. Humph, Takiko scoffed. This isn't over. But she allowed her teammate to lead her away. Why does she have to be here? Hana muttered. Takiko's comments cut her deep. She was over the loss of her first team, but the black-haired girl had successfully managed to reopen the wounds. Don't take it so hard, Hataru consoled her. She's just being a jerk. I can't, the brunette shook her head. I can't help but feel that I did abandon them. Just don't get too depressed about it. What would we do if you got yourself killed? The purple-haired girl asked. I don't plan on getting killed, the dog mistress scowled. Good, Hataru smiled. Then the signal sounded and the army moved out. Hot Springs Country Naruto had trouble keeping up with Jiraiya's pace. Who would have thought that the old hermit could be so spry? He got just as little rest as Naruto and he didn't show any sign of slowing down anytime soon. The young Chunin did his best not to slow him down, but the exhaustion did its work. He misjudged one jump and tripped over a branch he was trying to land on. He managed to catch the next one, so he didn't plummet to the ground, but he couldn't find the strength to get up and run on. He only held on to the branch and panted heavily. Hey, kid, what's the problem? Jiraiya asked. Too tired, the boy replied between pants. How can you be so fresh? One of the perks of being a legendary ninja, the Gamma Sennin replied. If you train diligently, you might be able to do it too. Can't we rest for a while? The blonde asked. No, the Sannin shook his head, we're too close to the enemy. What? Blue eyes widened in shock. Relax, the man smiled reassuringly, it's only a small group. Doesn't matter, the Jinchuriki replied. One would be too much for me now. Then rest quickly, Jiraiya suggested, because we are going to fight them. What? Naruto couldn't believe his ears. I feel like I'll fall asleep during the battle. I can do the fighting alone, the Toad Sage shrugged, but there's something I need your help with. What is it? The Chunin inquired. You are good with shadow clones, are you not? Jiraiya asked. Yes, Naruto confirmed. I need you to make as many as you can, the Toad Sage replied. We're going to convince the Kyumo forces there's an army here. Pranking the enemy, the boy grinned. I like that. Kyumo Camp Kamui yawned. Guard duty was boring, but it wasn't like he could afford to slack off. Especially since his unit was small and if they got taken by surprise, they could be easily wiped out. But so far nothing broke the numbing monotony. When they had begun the campaign, he had expected more action, but so far everything had been going smoothly. Not that he complained. He was all for earning his money without having to exert or even endanger himself. He knew they were going to see more fighting than they cared for once they'd crossed the Fire Country border, but so far things were going without a hitch. They and their allies had cut into the Hot Springs country like knife into butter, without encountering anything that would count as resistance. The forces of Hot Springs country were caught unawares and barely anybody tried to put up a fight. Not that there was anyone to put up the fight after the hidden Hot Springs village had been turned from a shinobi stronghold to a spa resort. Things were going good. And in Kamui's experience, it was too good to last. That is, why the sound of a snapping branch in the middle of the night was immediately interpreted as enemy. He jumped to his feet and it saved his life. A kunai grazed his pants in an area where his neck used to be less than a second before. Alarm, he shouted. His companions immediately opened their eyes, completely awake within a moment, as was prudent for all seasoned shinobi. Many of them didn't even have the time to grab their weapons. A virtual hail of kunai rained at them from the surrounding jungle. Grunts of pain let him know who was hit. Kamui himself evaded the barrage. It looked like most of it was aimed at the sleepers anyway. But before he could rejoice over his good luck, he noticed movement in the surrounding greenery. The enemy was here. He unsheathed his sword and prepared to fight. But then he noticed how many there were. They were outnumbered at least 10-1. There was no chance they could win this battle. There was only one thing he could do: he had to warn the main forces that there was a strong enemy force at their rear, perhaps even an army. He had no idea how. Did they outflank them, but he had to get out before they could outflank their core forces as well. He looked around. The attackers were jumping down from the trees, weapons drawn, and they were overrunning his comrades by sheer numbers. One tried to stab his unprotected back, but Kamui's well-honed reflexes saved him. He avoided the blade narrowly and sent the enemy flying with a kick. He didn't watch him land, instead jumping into the trees. "He's running," somebody shouted. A shuriken whistled past his ear. He could hear somebody giving pursuit. He pumped more chakra into his legs. The pursuer did the same, shortening the distance between them. And now they got further away from the racket of battle. He could hear there was somebody else trying to outflank him. He threw a handful of shuriken in his direction and a yelp of pain let him know he hit true. He allowed himself a small smile. Only one enemy remained. He ran for a little longer before stopping. He was going to get rid of his tail here and now. They were now far enough from the others so there was little risk of being interrupted. As long as the other guy wasn't a jounin, he should be fine. The pursuer reached him in no time. Kamui attacked him before he even landed. The pursuer, a middle-aged man in standard Konoha uniform, blocked with little trouble. Kamui followed with a kick to his stomach. The man took a step back. Kamui swung his sword again. The Konoha shinobi tried to block it with a kunai, not realizing it was a feint. Kamui's sword changed direction at the last moment and pierced his chest. The man fell to the ground with a gurgle. Kamui turned around and ran. He had to reach the main force as soon as possible. He had to inform them of the new threat. If he stayed a little longer, he might have noticed his pursuer's corpse turning into mud. Back in the camp, "Wow, you really are amazing," Naruto said with awe. "Did you ever doubt it?" Jiraiya smirked. "Seeing it is completely different," the young Chunin replied. "You weren't bad yourself," the white-haired man commented. "I wouldn't have been able to pull it off alone. Your clones were of great help." "Yeah," Naruto sighed. "I wonder how nobody noticed them popping. They don't have enough energy to do any fighting. Can I dispel them finally?" "No," the Toad Sage shook his head, "we still have to make it look like an army marched through here, so they are staying." "Crap," the Chunin complained, "I'm really beat." "Well, I'll keep them for a while longer, but you'll have to carry me when I faint." Hot Springs Country, now. The command sounded through the forest. The army of Konoha ninja lying in wait sprung into motion, descending upon the surprised Kyumo army like the wrath of heaven. They were very lucky to be able to pull off the ambush like they did. Hana was proud that it was partly thanks to her. The Himura siblings had detected a Cloud Scout and she and Hataru he managed to dispose of him before he could have sent a message. And then there was also the fact that the Kyumo army had inexplicably changed directions, which had allowed them to sneak up to their rear much easier. The moment of surprise was on their side. She saw Kyumo ninja falling dead before they realized what had happened. But there weren't many of them. Most had reflexes good enough to dodge at the last moment. They grabbed for their weapons to defend themselves. Then the battle really started. Hana, her dogs, Hataru and Tenzo fought as a team, being an effective unit taking down enemy ninja. But it lasted only for so long. They eventually ran into a jounin, who shot a lightning jutsu between them and augmented it with a couple of exploding tags. The resulting blast threw the dog mistress through nearby bushes and had her crashing to the ground painfully. She lay on the ground, fighting to catch her breath. She knew it was dangerous to just lie on a battlefield, but maybe she'd be mistaken for a corpse and left alone. But it seemed she didn't have her lucky day today. She more felt than heard somebody approaching her and the killing intent he was exerting revealed him as an enemy. She rolled on her back and gripped her kunai. She was still too shaken from the blast to be able to fight properly, but she wasn't going down without a fight. She pushed herself into a sitting position, but that was as far as she got. The man was almost upon her. Out of nowhere, one of her dogs appeared, but the man sent him flying with a kick. Hana growled like a beast, but her threatening gesture had no effect on her opponent. He approached her swiftly and stabbed at her with his tanto. She managed to block, but just barely. The strength behind the attack pushed her back down. She kicked at his stomach, but he avoided her foot nimbly. He pulled his arm back for another strike and she knew that this time she wouldn't be able to block. But then the man suddenly gurgled, red blood spouting from his neck, and fell to the ground beside her. "You really can't take care even of yourself," a scathing voice sounded next to her. "Takiko?" the brunette asked in surprise. "Who else?" the other girl retorted. "I would have never thought that I'd have to save you one day." "I'd have never thought I'd be saved by you," Hana replied. "Watch out." Takiko whirled around, but it was too slow. The Kyumo kunoichi that had suddenly appeared behind her was already swinging her kunai at her. The genin had no chance to block. But then a kunai thrown by Hana nicked her cheek and she hesitated in her strike. In the next moment a big gray dog jumped at her and tore her throat. "We're even," the Inuzuka heiress said. "We can never be even." "And that was your dog that saved me," Takiko pointed out. "Looks like he's a better ninja than you." "Whatever," Hana shrugged. She was in no mood to argue with the girl. And the middle of a battlefield was a bad place for discussions, period. She scrambled to her feet. Her body still hurt, but at least she was able to move now. "Let's go kick some Kyumo ass." "That's the smartest thing you ever said," Takiko remarked. "Just don't make me save you again." "I won't." Elsewhere on the battlefield Tenzo clasped his hands in a seal. The branches of a nearby tree moved, capturing 3 nearby Kyumo ninja. Before they could overcome their surprise and pry themselves out, Hataru appeared and finished them off with her kodachi. The two of them made an effective team, but it wasn't enough. The Kyumo army outnumbered them, even though not by much, and once the advantage of surprise had worn off, it began to show. So far, the Konoha forces held their own, but it was getting increasingly harder. Every single casualty on their side made the numerical advantage more prominent. And he was also worried about Hana. Ever since the explosion had separated them, he hadn't seen hair nor hide of the girl. And the one of her dogs who had landed next to them had run off somewhere as soon as his fur stopped smoking. Some instinct made him duck and a couple of shuriken sailed right through the space that used to be occupied by his head less than a second before. He immediately returned fire and a hiss of pain let him know that he hit, but failed to seriously wound the enemy. He sighed. One more problem to take care of and he was getting tired. He whipped out his ninjato and turned to face the man. Even though he defeated him easily, it did nothing to raise his spirits. From what he gathered from the shouts flying over the battlefield, the tides of battle began to turn against them. It looked like a commander in the Kyumo army managed to organize his underlings and attack Konoha's lines. So far they hadn't gotten far, but they were progressing steadily. If they weren't stopped soon, they would eventually force them to retreat. "We have to get that guy," somebody shouted. Tenzo shot a glance at the speaker. He recognized the scarred face of his old colleague from Anbu, Namishi Reidu. "That's easier said than done," he replied. "The guards around him are doing their jobs. They're good against long-range attacks," Reidu observed, "but what if somebody sneaked up on him?" "I don't see it happening," Tenzo answered. "They're too alert to let anything slip past them." "What if somebody lay in wait in their path?" a new voice suggested. They turned around and saw a young dark-haired woman with red eyes. "And how do you propose to do that?" Reidu asked. "I'm a genjutsu mistress," she explained. "I can conceal myself quite well." And they are bound to have somebody good at detecting genjutsu, the scarred man pointed out. But it's a good idea, Tenzo said, only I will do the hiding. Are you good with genjutsu? Kurenai questioned. No, he shook his head, but I have a special ability just for this kind of thing. I'll do the hiding and the two of you will provide a distraction. The plan was quickly agreed upon. Tenzo moved stealthily into the path of the Kyumo group. There he found a big tree on a small hill, a good place to overlook the battlefield, and melted into its trunk. This was one of the times when being a survivor of Orochimaru's experiments was a good thing. Then he had to only wait. It was agonizing to sit still and do nothing while his comrades fought and fell. He couldn't help but try to look for Hotaru and Hana. He spotted the purple-haired girl for a moment, wrestling with a Kyumo Chunin for a sword, but he lost the sight of her quickly. Hana he still couldn't see. He could only hope she was alright somewhere out there. At least he could see Reidu and Kurenai holding their positions. But he was a jounin, a former ANBU, and he was well trained for handling such situations. And as a bonus, he could rest and recover some of his energy. The battle had drained him of quite a lot. Finally, after what felt like an eternity to him, but was only a quarter an hour in reality, the Kyumo commander with his entourage moved closer to his tree. They expected a trap set up there, the place was just too convenient, and sent scouts ahead, but they found nothing suspicious. Well, a man fusing with the wood isn't something you encounter every day. The Kyumo commander stood on the hill, but not directly under the tree. Clever, Tenzo thought. If there was a hidden exploding tag in the tree, he would be only singed by the blast. It made his job harder, but not impossible. He concentrated his chakra and let it flow to the roots. He quickly found those that were closest to his target. There were none big enough directly under him, but his Mokuton power remedied it quickly. Then it was time to strike. The Kyumo commander didn't notice anything amiss until two thick roots wound themselves around his legs. His first reaction was to jump away, but the roots held fast. And they were tightening. He felt small roots piercing the battle wraps on his calves. His second idea was kawarimi, but it was very hard to perform while restrained. And even harder when said restraints were already drawing blood. Fortunately for him, by that time one of his bodyguards finally noticed what was happening and tried to cut off the roots with his sword. But the chakra-enforced wood was very hard and the blade got stuck in it. Immediately more roots sprouted up and captured the sword. Two more Cloud Shinobi jumped to help, but they were distracted by a huge fireball flying towards them, courtesy of Reidu. The flames were stopped by somebody erecting a mud wall, but the moment of distraction gave Tenzo the time needed to extend the roots even further. They now reached up to the commander's waist. Then somebody on Kyumo's side got the idea to hit the roots with lightning. They probably realized that wood was made up from water and earth chakra was susceptible to lightning. The discharge hit the roots near the ground. It wasn't enough to destroy them, but it disrupted the flow of chakra inside it, negating Tenzo's control over it. The roots turned from deadly weapons to dead wood. Tenzo cursed. Now he couldn't use the roots to attack anymore and there were too many alert enemies around to come out of the tree and attack personally. But he couldn't give up. Too much depended on his success. He commanded one of the undamaged roots still underground to form a spike and shoot at the commander's unprotected back. The commander was still captured within the now dead roots and couldn't evade. The spike slammed into his flak jacket. That was as far as it got, because one of the bodyguards fired a Raitun jutsu into it. The spike's progress was stopped, but it wasn't a complete failure. The overzealous bodyguard managed to shock his superior as well. Seeing that his Mokuton techniques weren't working, Tenzo left the tree and appeared under it. The Kyumo ninja looking for any more roots didn't notice him immediately, which gave him the time necessary to perform several hand seals. An earth dragon formed in front of him and charged at the Kyumo commander. It looked like he was going to succeed, but then 3 Kyumo ninja hit it with lightning attacks simultaneously. And Tenzo's supply of chakra ran out. The dragon crumbled to dust and Tenzo collapsed to his knees. 4 of the cloud shinobi ran at him and the 5th spat a stream of fire, but before they could reach him, Reidu appeared at his side and fired a Gakkaku at them. Kurenai followed at his heels and put one of the Kyumo ninja under an illusion that made him see enemies in place of his allies. Then they grabbed the exhausted man and quickly retreated, before the cloud shinobi could straighten the mess they had temporarily thrown them into. That didn't go too well, Reidu remarked. Sorry, Tenzo said, I couldn't do it. Don't beat yourself over it, the odds were against you, the scarred man advised him. Now the odds are against all of us, the Mokuton wielder grumbled. We did miss our best shot there, Kurenai added. It would be even harder to get the commander now. As soon as she finished speaking, the commander and his entourage were crushed under a giant frog. Hot Springs Country Naruto could only stare in awe as Jiraiya effortlessly tore into the Kyumo forces. Guess there is a reason he's legendary, other than his writing, he thought. In the next moment a whistle of a flying kunai snapped him from his musings. He dodged instinctively and turned towards the one who threw it. He was in the middle of the battlefield and he should be concentrating on other things than his teacher's performance if he wanted to live. He eyed his opponent. Judging from his flak jacket, he was a chunin. This shouldn't be hard, he thought. As he and Jiraiya had been trailing behind the Kyumo army, there wasn't much to do besides keeping quiet and the blonde was bored. He was itching to see some action and he wanted to try out the results of his training in real combat. He drew his ninjato, just as the Kyumo chunin finished his hand seals. Naruto jumped sideways and the ground he had been standing on turned to mud. He heard the cloud ninja cursing. Amateur, he thought. He sent wind chakra into his blade and attacked. The Kyumo chunin easily sidestepped the blade. Or so he thought. He didn't realize there was an invisible extension until it nearly cut him in half. Naruto didn't bother to watch him collapse and looked for his next opponent. He didn't have to search long. After the sudden demise of the Cloud Commander, his underlings were lacking orders and turned to attacking whoever was wearing Konoha headband without any organization or strategy. Naruto found himself being targeted by a pair of young men, probably brothers judging by their similar appearance. And they were certainly teammates, because they coordinated their attacks well. The shorter one threw a handful of shuriken at him, and as Naruto jumped away, the taller one unleashed a volley of kunai. The Konoha chunin couldn't dodge midair, so he had to evade via a kawarimi. The rock he exchanged himself with was immediately pierced through. A wind user, he thought with a surprise. This is going to be interesting. He landed behind them and swung his sword. The brothers leapt back, the wind blade missing them. Figures they would know that trick, Naruto thought. Before he could think anything else, the pair began forming hand seals. Katan, Housenka no Jutsu, cried the shorter one. Futon, Repushu, the taller one added. Naruto's eyes widened. The 5 small fireballs created by the Housenka were fanned by the wind of the Repushu and grew in size and temperature. Suetun, Mizurappa, he cried one of the few water jutsu he knew. He spat a stream of water from his mouth and hit one of the fireballs, quenching it. The other 4 were still after him and he had no time to repeat the jutsu. Guess I'm going to find out how does somebody caught in my firestorm feel. He ran to the side, but the fireballs changed their direction. They're good if they can control them, he thought. He moved the fastest he could, but the fireballs were closing in on him. And then he got a completely crazy idea. His teachers would probably tan his hide if they knew he as much as thought about it, but thankfully none of them were watching. He turned on his heel and sprinted right into the fireball. After all, that way he'd spend less time enveloped in the flames. It was hot. Unbearably so. And it hurt. But he paid no mind to it. He had to get through the fire the fastest he could. The second it took him to get to the other side was probably the longest in his life. He was sure his hair and clothes were on fire, but the look on the brothers' faces when they saw him emerging from the flames was worth it. He swung his ninjato, already charged with wind chakra, and the Kyumo Chunin were too slow to react. The wind blade cut deep into the taller one's chest. The shorter one was decapitated. Naruto dropped his sword and hit the ground. He rolled back and forth in an attempt to douse the flames. His ninja clothes weren't easily flammable, but the jutsu combo had been too hot. It had little effect. He needed water, but there was no stream nearby. Then suddenly he was hit by a great mass of cold water. He thought it would bring him relief, but instead the shock of cold on his burned skin brought him more pain. My, an unfamiliar voice spoke. It looks like your teammates are just as inept as you. He opened his eyes. He saw a vaguely familiar kunoichi with dark hair and blue clothes standing above him. Behind her he spotted Hana, the Himura triplets standing guard around her. "What are you doing here?" he blurted. "No thanks," the black-haired kunoichi raised an eyebrow. "I only just saved you from being roasted alive, so why should you thank me?" "Thanks," he said a bit embarrassed. "So what are you doing here?" Hana asked. "Hey. That was my line." "We're here with the army," the Inazuka answered. "You?" "I'm with Jiraiya," he explained. "I don't want to interrupt your touching reunion, but we're in the middle of a battle," Takiko reminded them. "How could we ever forget?" Hana commented, dodging a kunai somebody threw at her, thinking she was distracted and an easy target. In the next moment he had to fend off 3 angry dogs. Naruto climbed to his feet. Everything hurt, but the Kyuubi's healing factor was already working. He was able to fight again, and that was what he did. The battle didn't last much longer after that. The Kyumo's forces were in disarray ever since their commander died, and the presence of one of the legendary Sannin only fueled their panic. Many of the weak-hearted ran the moment the toad had appeared, and the others soon realized that the tides of battle had turned against them. Even those who were brave weren't suicidal. They could recognize a lost battle and decided to retreat to fight another day. Soon, the battlefield belonged completely to Konoha ninja. After that, the real chaos started. The medics ran across the battlefield looking for those who needed their attention, and many of the other ninja searched for their friends and teammates they got separated from during the fighting. Nobody really cared about the ninja code, and they openly expressed their joy if they found them alive or sorrow if they found them dead. Naruto and Hana looked for the rest of Team Tenzo. It wasn't easy even with the help of the Himura siblings. There were so many smells floating around that their noses had a hard time making any sense of it. Takiko left in search of her own team, so now it was only the 2 of them plus the dogs. They found Hataru first. She was sitting on a rare patch of undisturbed grass, using her field medkit to dress a couple of shallow wounds. "Hataru," he called at her. She lifted her head and smiled. "Naruto," the purple-haired kunoichi exclaimed. "What are you doing here? And what happened to your hair? And clothes?" "I helped with the fighting," he replied. "And a katan jutsu happened. Don't ask for the details." "I won't," she promised, "but how did you know about the battle?" "Ero Sennin took me here," he explained. "We've been stalking the Kyumo army for days." "Ero Sennin?" She raised an eyebrow questioningly. "Jiraiya," Naruto explained. "You call one of the greatest ninja to ever hail from Konoha Ero Sennin?" Hataru asked in disbelief. "Here you are, Gaki." Jiraiya's voice sounded from nearby. "And you found yourself 2 pretty ladies? Good job, my student." "Do you understand now why I call him Ero Sennin?" the blonde sighed. "Yes," Hataru grimaced upon seeing Jiraiya's lecherous grin. "So what are your names, beautiful ladies?" the porn writer asked. Those are my teammates, Naruto introduced them. Inazuka Hana and Yuzuki Hataru. So girls, what are you doing this evening? Jiraiya asked. Hey! Stop hitting on my teammates, the blonde boy protested. That's nice of you, Naruto, Hataru spoke, but you really don't have to do that. So you'll go out with me? The white-haired man asked hopefully. No, the girl replied with a kick. I meant I can take care of myself. Jiraiya looked hurt, but Naruto was convinced he was faking it. Did you see Tenzo? Hataru asked. No, Naruto shook his head. He was here too. Yes, the kunoichi confirmed. We got separated before you arrived. Then let's go look for him, the blonde Chunin decided. The group resumed their search. Battlefield, good thing Jiraiya-sama appeared, Reidu said. Yes, Kurenai agreed. We would have been toast if it wasn't for him. It wasn't that bad, Tenzo reassured her. You did very well. Are you really still a Chunin? Yes, she confirmed. I'm sure you'll get promoted soon, he said. Thanks, she smiled. Under different circumstances she might have blushed, but she was currently too tired for that. And look who's coming, Reidu said upon seeing the approaching Chunin team plus one Sannin. Naruto. Tenzo exclaimed. What are you doing here? And what happened to you? I'm with Jiraiya. Did you forget? He decided not to answer the second question. He didn't want a scolding for being reckless. No, but wasn't it too dangerous for you to fight? His guardian questioned. Considering, you know. And what was I supposed to do with him? The toad sage shrugged. Kyumo ninja were crawling everywhere. There was no staying out of the fight. I didn't want to leave him alone. This way he helped. It could have easily ended in a tragedy, Tenzo disagreed. Yes, Jiraiya admitted, it could. But then, anything might end in a tragedy. There's a war going on, didn't you notice? Don't we all know it? The Mokutan wielder sighed. So how are things going, Naruto? Great, the boy smiled. I'm learning a new jutsu. And your problem? He wanted to know. Ask him, the young Chunin pointed to Jiraiya. Still working on it, the sage informed them. Well, Tenzo shrugged, I didn't expect it so soon anyway. Well, Naruto, Jiraiya said, catch up with your teammates. I have a couple more people I have to see, and then we'll be leaving. Yes, Naruto, now explain why are you all charred? Fire Country Naruto was beginning to feel bored. After they had parted with the Konoha army, they had spent some time in the Hot Springs country and its neighboring territories gathering information on the invaders. That had been exciting, having to sneak around and occasionally fight some enemy shinobi, but then Jiraiya decided that they had gathered as much information they were going to get and headed south. So now they were near the southern shores of Fire Country, going from one holiday resort to another and asking about Jiraiya's old teammate, who nobody saw there for years. The young Chunin seriously didn't understand why they were doing this when they should be helping in the war, but that didn't matter to the Sannin. He said that their current priority was finding Tsunade and that's what they were doing. But otherwise Naruto had no reason to complain. The weather was nice and he really liked the sea. And the fact that nobody knew him so people didn't look at him oddly helped a lot too. Here he was just another boy with a bad haircut, his hair having yet to grow back completely after being mostly burned off in the battle. Even his training was going well. He still couldn't perform the Rasengan correctly, but the training had helped him with his whirlwind fist. He could now keep the blade spinning for minutes at a time and was thinking about adapting the technique for his feet as well. And Jiraiya claimed he had made some progress with his Kyubi problem as well. He still didn't show him a solution, but he insisted he was getting close. Naruto believed him. There were also some annoying moments. Jiraiya tended to disappear for hours on end and returned giggling perversely, usually still scribbling into his notebook. Often there was an angry mob of females chasing after him. Naruto lost count of how many times they had to skip town suddenly, because the Toad Sage was in danger of being dismembered. He couldn't comprehend why the man kept doing this. If Tsunade knew her old teammate Eni, she would be alerted to his presence from several towns away. And if she really didn't want to be found, she would have no problem evading them. He seriously suspected that the self-proclaimed super pervert considered their mission an excuse for womanizing. Jiraiya also made him hide his leaf headband and Chunin vest while traveling. He claimed it would spook Tsunade into running if she learned there were Konoha ninja nearby. Once again, Naruto had absolutely no idea what he was trying to accomplish with it when he didn't even try to cover his own rather distinctive appearance. Therefore he considered it highly suspicious, when Jiraiya suddenly announced that Tsunade had been spotted in the next town. But he didn't dare to question the spymaster's expertise aloud, for fear of another lecture, obediently packed his things and followed him on the road. Murakami was the same as most of the other coastal towns they have visited before, a moderately sized settlement with a neighborhood of hotels and entertainment resorts situated along a wide beach, trying desperately to attract tourists and cover up the fact that their glory days were long past, and a much larger area of residential quarters, a small trade port with a marketplace and the fisherman's district with adjoining slum. Life there went on like there was no war going on, a fact that had at first startled him, but he got eventually used to it, as it was the same in all the coastal settlements. All in all, nothing remarkable. There wasn't even any half-decent casino, so Naruto didn't understand what was Tsunade the legendary sucker doing there. From what he had gathered from Jiraiya, this was the one thing the slug Sannin couldn't live without. But she didn't owe money to anybody there, so that must have counted as a big plus. Jiraiya booked them into an inn and then left claiming he had to talk to some of his contacts. Naruto personally translated it as, went to peep on the girls on the beach. He remained alone with nothing to do. They had run all the way from the last town, so he felt too tired for training, but it was still day, so he wasn't sleepy either. So lacking any better option, he decided to browse the downtown, despite thinking that Murakami was going to be utterly boring. And he was partially right. The houses, shops and residents seemed the same as the ones at the previous town and the one before that and the one before that. But soon he saw something that chased the boredom away. Unfortunately, it wasn't something he wanted to see. He had spent only a week protecting Lady Mao and he still considered it the crappiest 7 days of his entire shinobi career, and that was counting the war. The arrogant noblewoman had a knack for making people's life hell. His experiences guarding her woke him up from his sleep on more than one occasion. But as much as he didn't want to remember it, he couldn't help but recall that it was then when he had briefly encountered Tsunade. It would be quite the coincidence if they found the elusive Kunoichi now, when the obnoxious noblewoman was in town too. While he was lost in thought, he failed to see that Lady Mao slowly drifted closer to him. He noticed it only when her unmistakable shrill voice snapped him from his thoughts. "What are you doing?" "What?" He blinked in confusion. He was merely standing in the middle of a street. "How dare you not make way when you see nobility coming?" "Oh, sorry," he muttered and tried to disappear. He didn't want to spend any more time in her presence than he absolutely had to. Every single second was torture. "And where do you think you are going?" She grabbed his arm. "Apologize properly." "Oh sorry, great and mighty lady," he began trying valiantly to keep the sarcasm from his voice, "for stepping into your path. I was so stunned with your beauty, that I was unable to move. Please forgive me for ever casting my unworthy peasant eyes on you, though I can never be forgiven for soiling your delicate hand by making you touch my filthy arm." By that time, they had gathered a small crowd of onlookers, some of whom were snickering openly. Mao ignored them. "Do you think a simple apology is enough?" she sneered. Naruto grimaced. "I would kiss your feet, if I didn't fear tainting them forever with my foul commoner's stench," he replied, and this time the sarcasm was quite apparent. "How dare you?" The noblewoman turned red, which was apparent even through her several layers of makeup. Naruto couldn't bear looking at her anymore. His eyes drifted over a crowd. He noticed a familiar face there. It belonged to a young woman with short black hair. Where had he seen her before? Was she perhaps a ninja of Konoha here on a mission? Then he noticed she was carrying a little piglet in her arms. That certainly looked familiar. And then he remembered. He had seen her while guarding Lady Mao. He had even spoken to her briefly. She was Tsunade's assistant. He couldn't believe his luck. They spent months looking for them and now he nearly ran into one of them. But what was he supposed to do? Call out to her? If they really didn't want to be found, that would make them run. Should he follow her? He was pretty good at trailing people, but he wasn't so confident to think he could fool a Sannin. Have you gone deaf? The shout reminded him that Lady Mao still held his arm in her death grip. He returned his attention to her. Then he noticed out of the corner of his eye Shizun turning around and leaving. Oh no, he thought. Did she recognize him? It was highly unlikely, but still. Sorry, he told Mao, I have to go. How dare you? She roared again, but he paid her no attention. He quickly freed himself from her grip. You broke my nail. You're going to pay for it. He ignored her outraged cries and made his way through the crowd towards Shizun. But before he pushed through all the people, he lost the sight of the kunoichi. He stood at the intersection and scanned the streets for any sign of the young medic. Nothing. Shizun had disappeared completely. He sighed. He'd have to inform Jiraiya. He wondered whether the sage was going to be glad or mad. Murakami finding Jiraiya was no easy feat. The town that had seemed so small suddenly proved that it possessed a vast supply of crooked streets and shadowy corners, all of which could hide the legendary sage. Even when he tried to concentrate on the places with pretty girls, it still left too many spots to check. And he had no idea where did the spymaster go. He sighed. This was going nowhere. The sun was already setting and there was still no sign of Jiraiya, Tsunade or her apprentice. He was seriously considering giving up and returning to the inn, waiting for Jiraiya to show up, probably tomorrow around noon, and then tell him and let him do the work. Only the old perv would probably scold him for not locating Tsunade when he had the chance. And maybe he would scold him for going off on his own and scaring her away when he was supposed to report to him immediately. So it was a tough choice. He decided that he shouldn't make it on an empty stomach and decided to have dinner first. He couldn't recall seeing a ramen stand, a shame, really, so he entered the first decent-looking diner he came across. He sat down at an empty table. Considering the hour, it was strange that there weren't more people, but the young Chunin didn't have that much experience with similar establishments, despite Jiraiya's attempts, so he didn't know what was normal. He studied the menu for a while and discovered that they served ramen, so he ordered a bowl of pork. He waited for the waitress to deliver it and then dug in. And promptly choked. His eyes filling with tears, he finally understood why this restaurant wasn't crowded. They dared to call this ramen? It could barely be called food. Somebody there should repeat their cooking lessons. Tucci would probably have a stroke if he saw somebody botch ramen like this. He couldn't stand that insult to all things holy in his mouth anymore. He spat it out, not caring where it was going to land. He then doubled over on his chair, coughing, trying to get rid of the horrible taste. Watch out, where do you spit, brat? An angry voice interrupted his misery. He blinked. The speaker sounded a bit drunk, but it was female. He could usually charm women with his cute eyes, so he didn't have much to worry about. He looked up. The first thing he noticed were breasts. He still wasn't in the age to be interested in them, but those were truly outstanding. Their sheer size was intimidating. Then he looked higher and noticed a big cleavage adorned with a strange necklace. Then he noticed a pretty young face currently twisted in an angry snarl. 2 blonde pigtails were next. And last came the diamond-shaped mark on her forehead. Oh. He blinked to make sure he wasn't imagining things. But nope. The sight stayed the same. He really did just spit on Tsunade. Next came the thought, how long had she been sitting there and how could he have missed her before? Then it occurred to him that it was quite a coincidence to run into her the moment he wasn't looking for her. And then he thought that whatever he had been supposed to do upon encountering her, spitting on her coat, certainly wasn't it. Jiraiya is going to kill me followed immediately after that. Well, brat, I asked you something. Tsunade growled. It occurred to the boy that maybe Jiraiya won't kill him, because there would be nothing left to kill after the woman finished with him. The slug Sannin looked that furious. Sorry, madam, he stammered, I didn't want to. But you did. Why did you do it if you didn't want to? She demanded. The ramen was so bad I just couldn't hold it, he explained. Well, she shrugged, the sake here's pretty bad too. But at least it's sake. She picked up the jug standing on her table and took a hearty swig. Suddenly she didn't look so angry anymore. Naruto began thinking that he might survive the encounter after all. But what was he supposed to do now? He wished he knew. And he wished Jiraiya was there, but the old man was still off perving somewhere. There was no chance he would suddenly walk through the door. Between running into Lady Mao, seeing Shizune and then spitting on Tsunade, he felt like he had already spent his daily quota of coincidences. Everything feels better when you get drunk, boy, Tsunade spoke. And if it doesn't feel better, drink some more and it will feel better. Or you'll forget about it. Yes, that's the good thing about drinking. But the bad thing is. I can't remember. But it doesn't matter. You're too young to drink anyway. She poured the sake to her cup, somehow managing not to spill a single drop, which seemed miraculous considering her state of inebriation, and downed it at one gulp. Naruto watched her with fascination. It looked like she had completely forgotten that she had been angry with him. He wondered what he should do. Drinking is just wonderful, she continued. I've already forgotten why I started drinking. I can't remember anything about the war, the dead, or the blood. Nope, nothing at all. The Chunin wondered just how intoxicated she was. She had seemed merely tipsy at first, but now it looked like she was seriously sloshed. As he watched pour herself another cup, he wondered whether he should stop her. He decided against it. He didn't want her angry at him again. Even drunk, a Sannin was still a formidable opponent. No, he'll just sit there, wait for her to drink herself to oblivion, and once she passed out, he'd pick her up and carry her to the inn he and Jiraiya shared. Yes, that sounded like a plan. The old geezer would be astounded with his accomplishment. He watched Tsunade slowly empty the jug and order another. He listened to her ranting about things that meant nothing to him, nodded at the appropriate times and wondered when she was finally going to pass out. He was beginning to worry that it might never happen. She didn't seem to be getting any drunker. Though, if he watched her really carefully, weren't her movements a little slower than they used to be? Or was it just his wishful thinking? Just as he was finally beginning to believe that his plan would succeed, the door to the bar opened and somebody walked in. Naruto at first paid it no attention. After all, lots of people came and went during the evening. But then the figure headed towards their table. Here you are, Tsunade-sama, it spoke. The voice sounded vaguely familiar to Naruto. With a jolt he realized it was Shizune. You shouldn't be sitting here like that. And you shouldn't have left without telling me where you were going. There are Konoha ninja in town. I saw one earlier this afternoon. What if they saw you and, oh. Her eyes fell on Naruto. Looks like they already did. What? Tsunade blinked. She was still drunk, but suddenly she seemed alert. Her honey-colored eyes focused on the boy in front of her. Oh, he thought as her face twisted in a snarl. His eyes darted left and right. It only confirmed what he already knew, he was trapped. The two women stood between him and the door. There was a back door leading to the kitchen, but he was separated from it by the counter and several tables with guests. And there was little chance he would make it that far anyway. They were too good to make an escape possible. And fighting was out of the question too. Guess I'll have to talk my way out of this, he thought. So you've been spying on me all the time, Tsunade stated angrily, grabbing him by his collar. No, Naruto shook his head. Ha! And you think I'd believe that? The slug Sannin accused him. It's the truth, honest, the Chunin defended himself. I just came here for some ramen, I had no idea you'd be here. Then why did you stay for so long? She questioned. Naruto racked his brain for a believable answer. I knew it. You are here for me, the blonde Kunoichi stated. She looked about ready to punch his face and considering what he had heard about her monstrous strength. Don't you think you're overreacting, Tsunade-sama? Shizune interjected. Naruto would have kissed her, if Tsunade's fist wasn't still holding him in place. No, she answered firmly. There goes my chance, Naruto thought wistfully. Where is Jiraiya when I need him? He's just a kid, Shizune reasoned with her. So, the older woman shrugged. When I was his age. He isn't you, the younger woman pointed out. I know he isn't me. But I know his type. The little ones are the most dangerous. I'm not dangerous. Naruto assured her. Not at all. Who do you have me for? She snarled. Do you honestly think I'm going to believe that? It's the truth, he insisted. She still refused to believe him. Tsunade-sama, you shouldn't choke him. That would get us in trouble, Shizune tried to placate her. We're already in trouble, if some little punk kid found us, the legendary medic muttered. Then let's just leave, the dark-haired woman suggested. We can lose them like we keep losing the debt collectors. We can, Tsunade agreed like it only now occurred to her. So you can just let him go, Shizune continued. She probably didn't like seeing little kids being manhandled. No, the Sannin shook her head. No letting him go. He'd just run back to his teammates and tattle on us. He's going with us. You want to take him with us? Shizune's eyes widened. Just until we skip the town, her teacher decided. Then he can go wherever he wants. And so Naruto found himself dragged off by a legendary powerful drunken ninja. It wasn't an entirely new experience, Jiraiya had done it to him before, but this time it felt much more dangerous. There was no telling what an inebriated Tsunade was going to do. Naruto took a calming breath and wished desperately that they'd run into Jiraiya. Though, considering his current luck, it didn't seem likely. Murakami Tsunade dragged him through the streets towards her lodgings. Some of the people around stopped and gave them a strange look, but most of them weren't interested. A kid being dragged by his neck by an angry drunk woman was probably a common sight here. Or maybe they thought he was Tsunade's son, so they didn't find it strange. The boy kept scanning the crowd for the familiar tall form of Jiraiya. His white hair should shine like a beacon, but he couldn't see him anywhere. Just where was the old man peeping? All too soon they arrived at Tsunade's hotel. The Sannin dragged him up the stairs to her room and showed him in the corner. Stay here, she commanded. Naruto nodded. Or should I tie you up? I'll be good, he promised. Am I supposed to trust you? She snapped. Who do you think I am? I'll just tie you up anyway. Isn't that a bit overboard, Tsunade-sama? Shizune asked. No, the legendary medic disagreed. Knocking him out would be overboard. Though maybe I should do it. Naruto paled. He certainly didn't want to be knocked out by Tsunade. She might overdo it and crack his skull instead. He wished Jiraiya would suddenly walk into the room, but that would require more luck than he usually had. And he felt like he had maxed his quota for unexpected encounters for today. I'll tie him up, Shizun decided, seeing that her mistress was about to do something stupid. Well, the blonde woman agreed. But make sure he can't get out. The dark-haired woman walked over to the scared boy. Sorry, she whispered. Tsunade-sama is not bad, but she gets all sorts of crazy ideas when she's drunk. So I've noticed, Naruto replied. He held still as Shizun bound his wrists. He knew that if he struggled, it would be only worse. And besides, they didn't block his chakra. If he really needed, he could cut the ropes using his wind blades. He had enough control over it to do it without slicing off his fingers. But that still didn't answer the question on what was he supposed to do. He couldn't rely on Jiraiya appearing suddenly, but how was he supposed to keep the woman here himself? He didn't know about anything he could do to make her stay. Maybe if he kicked her backpack, the contents would spill and she'd have to repack. No, that was a stupid idea. It wouldn't delay her for more than a couple of minutes and he'd call her wrath on his head unnecessarily. If he just sat quietly, nothing would happen to him. And once the two women left, he'd get rid of the rope, look for Jiraiya and they would pursue them. Yes, that sounded like a plan. It did have a glaring flaw, namely that it might take a long time to locate the super pervert and that it might take even longer before he sobered up, but it was the best he could come up with, so that was what he was going to do. Finally the two women finished packing. Well, brat, we're leaving. So be nice and don't go running off, Tsunade said. Shouldn't we untie him now? Shizun asked. Nah, the slug Sannin waved her hand dismissingly. He's a ninja. He can get out of it on his own. Alright, Tsunade-sama. The blonde woman moved to the door and opened them. And stood still, blinking in shock. Oh, Tsunade-hime. What a lucky coincidence. Jiraiya's voice sounded from the hallway. Won't you invite me in? Or are you going somewhere? Naruto sighed in relief. The old pervert was here. He didn't have to decide everything on his own anymore. What do you call a coincidence? You were stalking me. Tsunade accused him. Stalking? Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. That's such a nasty word. No, I wasn't stalking you. In fact, I had no idea you were in town until I arrived. And then I heard you were here. What teammate would I be if I didn't pay you a visit? It's been so long since we last saw each other. Whatever made you think I want to see you again? The slug princess scowled. We haven't seen each other in years and you're still so cold, the Gamma Sannin pouted. And you're still a pervert, the busty woman retorted, seeing how the white-haired man eyed her cleavage. Honestly, I thought you'd grow out of puberty by now. What's wrong with appreciating beauty? Jiraiya said defensively. The way you do it is wrong, Tsunade growled. As they talked, Naruto cut the rope around his wrists. Shizun didn't wrap them particularly tight, but still it was a great relief to get out of them. He stood up and walked to the door. He spotted Jiraiya standing there at the same time the Toad Sage spotted him. Oi, Gaki, what are you doing here? The man asked. You know him? Tsunade scowled. Then she turned to Naruto. I knew it. You were spying on me. No. I ran into you by accident. Honestly, the boy defended himself. That's true, Jiraiya said. I've been looking for you myself. Then what is he doing here? The blonde woman questioned. I'm just dragging him around, the white-haired man answered. Well, that being said, we'll be going, Tsunade decided and tried to push past Jiraiya. The Gamma Sannin didn't let her. And where do you think you are going? He asked. I didn't even tell you why I am here. Save your breath, the slug Sannin snapped. The answer is no. I didn't ask you anything yet, Jiraiya replied. You didn't have to, Tsunade deadpanned. I know what are you going to ask. Do you? Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. Either it is something perverted or you want me returned to Konoha or it is something perverted. In either case, the answer is no. Well, you know me too well. Tsunadeheim, Jiraiya smiled embarrassedly. But please reconsider. No, she shook her head resolutely. There is no way I'm ever returning to that hellhole. Konoha isn't a hellhole. Naruto shouted. Tsunade whirled to him. Watch it, brat. You have no idea what are you talking about. Naruto took a step back. He thought he had seen Tsunade angry before, but that was nothing compared to this. The killing intent she released nearly forced him to his knees. He found himself unable to speak. Even breathing was suddenly difficult. Tsunade, that's enough. Jiraiya shouted. The enraged woman turned to him. Don't tell me what I should do. Tsunade-sama. Shizen's attempt to calm her mistress down yielded no results. Can't we talk about it quietly? The Toad Sage asked. No, the slug Sannin stated. I'm not returning to Konoha and that's final. Sensei wants you back, the white-haired man pleaded. Sensei is a fool, she scoffed. What makes him think I'll return now of all times? We need you, Tsunadeheim. Well, I don't need you. Please. Jiraiya accompanied the word with the best rendition of puppy dog eyes Naruto had ever seen. Unfortunately Tsunade seemed to be immune. Quit it, Jiraiya, she answered curtly. Konoha has no right to want anything from me. It already took away everything it could. That's not true, the Toad Sage argued. It is true, the woman insisted. Tell me, Jiraiya. Can you bring back Dan? Or Nawaki? The man only hung his head. I thought so, Tsunade continued. I'm done with Konoha. I've been done with it for a long time and nothing you say can change my mind, so deal with it. Shizun, let's go. You can't just walk away. Naruto had gathered his bearings and tried to call her back. When she turned towards him, he had to wonder what had possessed him to speak up. Her eyes seemed red with rage. Or maybe it was unshod tears. He couldn't tell. And who is going to stop me, brat? You? Go home to your mommy and stop playing at being a ninja. You'll live longer. And spend the rest of my life hiding like a coward? No, thanks. Naruto had no idea where did he find the courage. Idiot, Tsunade scoffed. You'll just get killed like the fool you are. Well, I'd rather die of an enemy kunai than liver cirrhosis. Tsunade's hotel room. The first sensation that registered in Naruto's brain was pain. All of his body hurt. Badly. He tried to figure out where was the pain coming from with little success. All of his body seemed to be the source. He slowly opened his eyes. The light was painfully bright, but at least it helped him forget how did the rest of his body feel. You awake, Gaki? Jiraiya's voice asked. Naruto nodded and immediately regretted it. His head exploded in pain. He waited until it subsided. What happened? He asked. You told Tsunade something she didn't want to hear, the Toad Sage answered. And? And what else would you like to know? Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. Questioningly. Why does everything hurt? Can't you tell? You pissed off Tsunade. And? Do I have to spell it for you? Jiraiya sighed. She punched you. You made quite a nice hole in the wall. Oh. Naruto blinked. That made sense. Only he couldn't remember it happening and could barely recall what did he say. It must have been that traumatic amnesia he kept hearing about. Oh indeed, the sage nodded. What were you thinking, goading her like that? I thought so. You weren't thinking, Jiraiya berated him. You could have ended up dead. Though, it was good for something. Tsunade decided to stay around to heal you. Naruto didn't know what to say to that. And now the brat is awake, we'll be on our way, Tsunade commented. Naruto blinked in surprise. He had no idea she was there until she spoke. He turned after her voice and tried to sit up. He fell back down with a painful moan. It looked like even Kyuubi's healing had some trouble with the damage caused by Tsunade's inhumanely strong punch. Careful there, the woman in question said, kneeling next to him. I just finished patching you up, so don't mess up my work. You're the one who punched me, Naruto reminded her. Don't be cheeky, brat. Or I'll punch you again, Tsunade threatened. But her hand was already glowing green, assessing the damage done to Naruto's ribs. So maybe she wasn't really as angry as she seemed. That would be quite an accomplishment, Tsunade, Jiraiya commented. Punching a child who's barely able to move, you weren't like that before. Shut up or I'll punch you, the legendary medic informed him angrily. I'm used to it, Tsunade-heim, the Toad Sage shrugged. But him, he looked at Naruto, if he weren't what he was, you could have killed him. Really, Tsunade, that was low. I've already agreed to stay until he heals, she snapped. Don't push your luck. You didn't used to be like that, Tsunade-heim, Jiraiya said ruefully. You used to beat me all the time, but nearly killing a child for saying something you didn't like, you've fallen so low. I told you not to push it, the slug Sannin growled angrily. Are you going to punch me too? Jiraiya raised an eyebrow daringly. Are you going to smash anything you don't like and then drown yourself in sake in a futile attempt to forget? Because no matter what you say, he was right. You are only wasting away. I told you to shut it, she bellowed and punched him through the wall. Ero Sennin. Naruto shouted in alarm, trying to sit up. Don't, Tsunade admonished him, you'll just hurt yourself. But Ero Sennin. We'll be fine, she finished. He survived worse. Just at the moment Jiraiya climbed through the hole. He was holding his ribs and his movements were strained. Yes, I've survived worse, but I used to be younger back then. But then again, so did you. This barely hurt. Tsunade tried to punch him again, but this time Jiraiya dodged. So full of anger, he observed. The time away from Konoha didn't do you any good. That's up to me to decide, she snapped angrily. Naruto gathered his strength and pushed himself into sitting position. It hurt, but it wasn't as bad as before. Well, lady, he spoke, I don't know how you used to be before, but it looks to me that whatever are you doing now isn't helping. So won't you consider a change? You mean going back to Konoha? She scoffed. No way. In hell. Why do you even hate it so much? Naruto asked. Jiraiya had never explained it to him. It took everything from me. Now that's unfair, Jiraiya commented. You can't blame Konoha for what happened. I can and I will, she snapped. You're just being stubborn. I am not. And now you're sounding like a spoilt little princess, he pointed out. But I guess you've always been a bit of a spoilt little princess, Tsunade-heim. Watch your mouth, Jiraiya, she threatened. Is anger your default reaction to everything? Naruto asked. Don't be cheeky, brat, she scolded him. It sounds like it is, the boy commented, seemingly to himself. In that case I don't understand why the Hokage wants you back. You'd only end up maiming our own forces. Don't say such things about Tsunade-sama. Shizune defended her mistress. You know nothing about her. Then enlighten me, he prompted. Don't bother, Shizune, Tsunade waved her hand. Jiraiya must have told him. He didn't. No? She looked genuinely surprised. Then ask him. I'm not going to talk about it. Does it still hurt so much? The Gama Sennin asked. Yes, Tsunade answered. Then won't you agree you need a different cure? Jiraiya proposed. As a medic, if one cure doesn't work, you should look for another, shouldn't you? I already told you, I'm not going to Konoha. You avoided my question, Tsunade-heim. Don't you agree that you need a different cure for your grief? Do you have one? Suddenly she sounded defeated. Naruto couldn't think of any better word for it. Maybe we can find one, Naruto offered. Don't think so highly of yourself, brat, she scoffed. You're just a wet behind-the-ears kid. But doesn't he remind you of him? Jiraiya asked. Tsunade blinked in surprise, looking at Naruto like it was the first time she saw him. That was low, Jiraiya, she said bitterly. Even for you. You forced me to it, he replied. Just what are you talking about? Naruto asked. Everybody ignored him. No matter what you say, I won't change my opinion, the slug princess stated. Still as stubborn as ever, Jiraiya sighed. Tell me, Tsunade, do you really hate Konoha so much? Why do you ask? She raised an eyebrow. You should already know the answer, yes. That's what I thought, Jiraiya sighed. But still, don't you think it's unfair to blame it all on Konoha? No. Looks like we're going nowhere, the Gama Sennin commented. Yes. Then would you just quit it? It's only annoying the both of us. I'm afraid I cannot do that, Tsunade-heim. You see, I have my orders. I don't care about your orders, she scoffed. I'm not returning there ever again. I won't let Konoha take anyone else from me. Isn't there anything I could do to convince you? Can you bring them back? She asked skeptically. No, Jiraiya shook his head ruefully. So no, there isn't. So you're running away from Konoha because somebody dear to you died? Naruto asked. No, she corrected. Because Konoha killed them. You know, Tsunade, I was once in the hospital, Naruto started. So? She asked in a bored tone. And there I saw a doctor explaining to a mother that her son had died. The woman had completely broken down. So you see why I can't return there. No, the boy shook his head, I don't. And I'm not finished telling the story. You see, the doctor told the poor mother something, if only Tsunade-sama was here, she could have saved him. But there's no one in Konoha as good as her. Damn right there isn't, she said proudly. You didn't get the point, did you? Naruto asked. You hate Konoha because you lost somebody. I can't argue with that. I don't know what happened. That you don't, she agreed. But there are lots of people in Konoha who have a good reason to hate you because their loved ones died because you weren't there to heal them. So is drinking your life away really so much more important than saving people's lives? Now he hit a sore spot. He recognized it immediately by the mad look in her eyes. There was both anger and tears. Tears, he wondered. He had no time to consider it further. She swung her fist at him. He had just enough time to try to block. It did him little good against Tsunade's monstrous strength. Her fist connected with his forearm. He felt the bones snapping and the kunai he kept in his sleeve cut into his flesh. Then he was knocked to the ground. Tsunade looked first at him, then at her fingers. She blinked as she studied the red liquid covering them. Blood? She asked in disbelief. Then she began shaking uncontrollably, standing frozen to the spot. Naruto watched her in confusion, which wasn't suppressed even by the pain in his arm. What happened to her? He asked. Tsunade-sama is afraid of blood, Shizune explained. She's been like that ever since Uncle Dan died in her arms. That's quite a problem for a ninja, the boy observed. It's even a bigger problem for a medic, the dark-haired woman explained. We can't avoid seeing blood in our profession. That's why Tsunade-sama cannot be a medic anymore. It's tearing her from inside out, even more than the deaths of Dan and Nawaki. I had no idea, Naruto said. Well, now you know. Are you happy with your work? My work? Naruto blinked. She's the one who punched me. And I'm the one with the broken arm. Allow me to take a look at it, Shizun offered. I'm not as good as Tsunade-sama, but I can still help. Sure. There was silence as Shizun worked. Naruto was trying hard not to cry. The wound hurt a lot. Tsunade was still rooted to the ground, staring at her bloody fingers and shivering. She didn't seem to even blink. Jiraiya just sat in a corner and watched the proceedings with a grim face. That's all I can do for now, the dark-haired medic declared after a while. I'm afraid you won't be able to use it for 2 weeks. I heal fast, the Jinchuriki replied. That's good for you. So what are we going to do now? Naruto asked. He looked at Tsunade, who still hadn't moved. We have to wait until she snaps out of it, Shizun answered. How long is it going to take? Who knows, Shizun shrugged. Can't we do something to snap her out of it? Naruto questioned. Like dunk her with cold water or something. Dunk Tsunade-sama with cold water? Shizun sounded horrified with the prospect. But it might work, Jiraiya said. He stood up and headed out, presumably searching for a bucket. Shizun still looked scandalized, but she didn't protest. Naruto watched the petrified form of Tsunade. He didn't know what to think about her. At first, he had thought she was a coward for running away, but now he had to reconsider. She hadn't left Konoha just because she had felt like it, but because she genuinely was no good for the village. But what was she now? Should he still consider her a coward for freezing upon seeing blood? Or should he consider her ill? He had very limited experience with phobias. No one from his closest people suffered from one, as far as he knew. He had seen girls shrieking when they saw a mouse or a cockroach, but never had he witnessed anything remotely close to this reaction. It left him confused. It also made him want to help, but he had no idea how. Shizun, why is Tsunade like that? He asked. She's terrified of the sight of blood, the younger woman answered. I know, but what made her like that? It happened when Uncle Dan died. They loved each other dearly and wanted to marry. One day, they were on a mission together. I wasn't there, so I know only what I've heard about it. Dan was fatally wounded and Tsunade-sama attempted to heal him, but she failed. There was so much blood there. Tsunade completely froze with shock and grief, and every time she sees blood, she's reminded of that time. Shizun finished her story and stared off into the wall. Her face was sad, making it clear that it was a painful topic even for her. So that's how it is, Naruto spoke thoughtfully. He tried to imagine how it must have been. What was it like to love someone that much? What was it like to watch them die? He imagined if it was Tenzo or one of his teammates dying in front of him. What would he do then? Would he fall apart too? He always came to the conclusion that he would rip apart whoever did it, even if it meant using the Kyuubi. But then, it didn't really happen to him, so he shouldn't judge. Then Jiraiya returned carrying a bucket, which he promptly dumped on Tsunade's head. The cold water shook the woman awake. She stopped shaking, looked at her wet jacket and then at the grinning Jiraiya. Then she punched him. Pervert. You did it to see me in wet clothes. How can you think that about me? I did it to snap you out of the fit. But the way he was eyeing her now very visible curves told another story. I know you. Jiraiya had the good grace to look a bit guilty, though his eyes remained rooted on her breasts. Stop it or I'll punch you again, Tsunade threatened. Now look at me, I can't go out in this. And don't even think about watching me change my clothes. Tsunade-sama, I think you should take a look at his arm. I see you've already treated it, Shizun. But I'm not as good as you and the bone is badly shattered. Alright, Tsunade sighed and began the examination. She was so engrossed in her work that she even ignored Jiraiya's eyes on her form. You were right, Shizun, she said after a while, there are a couple of bone fragments lodged in the muscle. If they're left there, it would be very painful for him to move the arm. I should operate. She suddenly stopped and clamped a hand over her mouth. Naruto couldn't help but notice that she paled. What's wrong? He asked. Blood, she whispered. That's bad, Shizun commented. Tsunade-sama cannot perform the operation for her fear of blood and I'm afraid I'm not good enough. You are, her teacher assured her. It's not that hard. It would be better if you could do it, Shizun pointed out. No. No, I can't. I just can't, Tsunade replied, shaking. Her student looked at her ruefully. As you wish, Tsunade-sama. I wish things could be like I wished, the blonde woman replied. Nobody had a reply to that. Murakami, the town didn't have a decent hospital. But after some effort, they managed to find a doctor with a well-equipped office and convinced him to let them perform the operation there. Shizun performed it, under the instructions of Tsunade. It really wasn't as hard as she had thought. She managed to remove all the bone fragments safely and when Tsunade checked Naruto's arm later, completely bandaged so not a single drop of blood was visible, she stated that there were no more problems and commended Shizun for her good work. Then she stated that even with Naruto's enhanced healing, it would take nearly 2 weeks for the arm to heal. She agreed to stay for the time, claiming she wanted to be at hand should complications arise. They stayed in their respective inns, visiting each other. Tsunade examined Naruto's arm every day and always said that it was healing well. Jiraiya kept trying to convince her to return to Konoha with them, but she kept saying no. Naruto couldn't be sure whether he was deluding himself or not, but he thought that her no didn't sound as convinced as it did on the first day. One day, Naruto was sitting on the terrace, holding an air balloon in his uninjured hand. Concentration, he thought. Don't break it. But it wasn't that easy. The water balloon and the rubber balloon exercises had been hard, but they seemed like a piece of cake compared to this. He barely started spinning his chakra inside and it broke. He was going through his supply of balloons at a high rate and he didn't feel like he was making any progress. Maybe if I tried it with a bigger ball first. And once I learned that, I'd try with a smaller one. It sounded like a plan, so Naruto picked one of the balloons and blew more air into it. The balloon broke. Crap, the boy thought, what are they made of? Did Jiraiya buy crappy balloons on purpose? It felt like it. The old sage definitely seemed to be amused by his failures. Maybe I should just forget about the balloons at all, Naruto mused. That way I'll at least see what am I doing. And I'd use the balloon again when it looks like I'm getting close. He extended his hand and focused the chakra into his palm. A small vortex appeared there, rapidly growing bigger. It soon formed into a spinning ball with strands of chakra trailing behind it. It looks better than it used to, the boy observed, but it still isn't good enough. For the next few minutes, he concentrated on making the strands disappear, leaving only the sphere. He had little success, but he thought he managed to make them thinner and weaker. But it could have been just his wishful thinking. He took a little breather and then started again. Maybe he was deluding himself, but he felt like he was improving, though only slightly. He observed the chakra ball in his hand and then compared it with the balloons. It looks like the sphere is a tiny bit bigger than the balloons, he observed. That means even if I did it right, that stupid balloons would still explode. Stupid Erosenin. I bet he did it on purpose. I'm going to have a word with him whenever he comes back from his peeping. But the first one who came was Tsunade. Naruto blinked in surprise. She usually didn't show up so early in the day. Then he noticed that it was already noon. He had been so engrossed in his training that he forgot about the passage of time. Training? She raised an eyebrow. You should be taking it easy, you are wounded. I'm using the other arm, he answered, though in fact he wanted to say, and just whose fault it is. But he didn't want to have his other arm broken, so he held his tongue. I hope so, but it's your arm, not mine. Now let's have a look at it. She knelt beside him and activated her diagnosing tick jutsu. It's healing well, she announced after a while. It doesn't seem like there would be an infection at this point. That's great, Naruto smiled. For you, Tsunade agreed. So tell me, why were you practicing the Rasengan? Ero Sennin showed me to it. He's been always an idiot, the legendary healer scoffed. The Rasengan was the Yondame's prized jutsu. There's no way a little kid can get it right. Hey! Naruto protested. I'm already pretty close. Watch it. He formed the Rasengan the best he could. The slug Sannin watched it critically. I admit you're better than I thought, but I doubt you can make it work. You are just wasting time. That's not true, the boy took offense. I can do it. And even if I didn't, the training already helped me greatly with my original technique. So it isn't a waste of time. If you say so, she shrugged. But I still say you won't be able to do it. I say I will. Naruto's competitive spirit had awakened. I say you won't, Tsunade insisted. I will. Maybe when you grow up. But I won't be there to see it because we'll part ways in a week. Then I'll do it in a week, Naruto declared proudly. Somehow he felt like he could really do it. That's impossible, she scoffed. No, it isn't. I'm not going to convince you, am I? No, he shook his head resolutely. Well then, let's make a bet, the Sannin suggested. If you can do it, I'll stick around for longer. I'll maybe even go back to Konoha, just to see how are you going to turn out. If you can't do it, you and Jiraiya won't ever bother me again. I can't make Jiraiya do anything, Naruto objected. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of that. So are you on? Yes, he grinned. So pack your things, Bachan, in a week you're coming with us. Don't call me Bachan. Tsunade brow twitched. I'm not that old. And don't be so sure you are going to win, because you are going to lose. But I will win. I will master the Rasengan in just a week, Naruto replied with a smirk. Ha! You think you are so good? There's no way you can do it. Not really, he shook his head. You just made sure I will do it. Oh, she raised an eyebrow. How? You bet against me, legendary sucker. Murakami Naruto was sitting on the porch of the inn, spinning a ball of chakra in his right palm. He scowled as he saw the lines trailing behind it, forming a vortex. He had barely improved since he had made the bet with Tsunade. Sure, it was still the same day, but if he wanted to win, he had to progress faster. What are you doing, Gaki? Naruto nearly jumped when he heard Jiraiya's voice right next to his ear. Low situational awareness, that just wouldn't do, the hermit shook his head. I wasn't even trying to sneak up on you. Sorry, the boy answered sheepishly. Sorry? Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. You can't tell an enemy ninja sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Could you please try sneaking up on me again? Naruto had to laugh when he imagined the situation. That's no laughing matter, the Toad Sage informed him. If I were an enemy you would have been already dead. I'll pay more attention to my surroundings next time, Naruto promised. You better do. And now to the original question, what are you doing? Training the Rasengan. Why aren't you using the balloons? The Sannin inquired. They always pop. This way I can at least see what I am doing wrong. And pervy sage, those balloons are too small. They pop even if I do it right. No, they aren't, Jiraiya disagreed. I can form a Rasengan inside one without any trouble. Look. He picked up a balloon and... I can't see anything, Naruto frowned. The balloon is in the way. Jiraiya sighed and formed a Rasengan in his other palm. It's small enough to fit in, see? Yes, Naruto admitted. Jiraiya's Rasengan was indeed small enough to fit into the balloon without any trouble. But it shouldn't matter if my is bigger, should it? It should. Really? Why? The Chunin asked a bit disappointed. The smaller the orb, the more concentrated the chakra, the Sannin explained. And the more concentrated chakra, the stronger the jutsu. It can drill through harder materials and do more damage. Oh, the blonde blinked in disappointment. But I can't make it that small in a week. A week? The white-haired man raised an eyebrow. Why would you want to complete it in a week? I made a bet with Tsunade. And he explained the terms of the wager. Well, Gaki, Jiraiya spoke when he finished, you have a lot of work ahead of yourself. Because this one is a bet even the legendary sucker would have a lot of trouble to lose. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Naruto muttered sarcastically. You're welcome, the Gamma Sannin smirked. You are going to need it. Hey! You should be more helpful here. Any tips for me? No, the white-haired man shook his head. I did it to help you. Well, you took it by the wrong end, Jiraiya shrugged. When you lose, I'm going to have a lot more trouble convincing Tsunade to return. When I lose? Naruto asked incredulously. Well, you don't really expect to win, do you? Of course I do, the boy answered, offended. Then I shouldn't bother you anymore. Good luck with your training. Hey! What about the help? Help yourself, the toad sage answered, and then he was gone, probably to peep again. Naruto sighed. Jiraiya was no help again. It looked like he had to figure it out on his own. And he should hurry. A week was an awfully short time. He spun the chakra in his palm again. Near the Inshizun watched as the boy trained diligently. She had no idea how far along in his training he was, so she had no way to tell if he improved, but in the hour she spent observing him she didn't notice any progress. Not that she really expected it. She sighed. She wished him success, but so far it didn't seem likely. Her thought turned to what depended on his performance. It had been years since she had left Konoha with Tsunade-sama. So many that she had lost count. Back then, she had been just a young girl following her greatest idol and the closest thing she had to family after Uncle Dan's death. She had graduated the academy shortly before, and she was looking forward to the adventures awaiting her in the world outside with wide, eager eyes. Oh, how naive she used to be. Sure, there were some adventures to be had, and she had learned a lot in the way of medicine from Tsunade-sama, but too often she had to drag her drunken mistress back from a bar or help he shake debt collectors. She still admired the legendary Sannin, and she had no one else in the world, but she had gotten tired of this lifestyle years ago, and she didn't know how much longer she could go on. Her thoughts turned to Konoha. It had been so long since she last saw the village hidden in the leaves. Would she even recognize it still? So much must have changed since she left. There must have been a lot of construction work after the Kyubi attack. Was her old house still standing? She had no idea. And the Hokage monument? Last time she saw it there had been only 3 faces. How did it look now? And what about the people she knew? Her family had been dead before she had left, but there were still her friends and classmates. What had become of them? She had asked herself the question occasionally, but ever since meeting Jiraiya and his apprentice, it refused to leave her mind. Yes, she wanted to return to Konoha very much, and it all depended on one spur-of-the-moment bet and the results of this boy's training. She observed quietly as another chakra orb was nearly obscured by the trails following after it before dissipating. She sighed. So far, her return didn't seem likely. She'd have to help it if she wanted Naruto to succeed. She wanted to see her home again, no matter that it was currently at war. Maybe her skills would be needed to save some of her old acquaintances, who would have died otherwise. She left her hiding spot and slowly walked over to the boy. He failed to notice her approach, being too focused on his latest attempt. Only when it dissolved he noticed and whirled to face her. By that time, she was just a few steps away from him. "Shizen-san," he greeted. "Hello, Naruto," she smiled. "Do you realize that if I were an enemy you would have been already dead?" The blonde looked sheepishly. "I got the same lecture from Jiraiya earlier. It's just that I have to concentrate really hard to make it work at all." "I can imagine," the dark-haired medic nodded. "I know how much concentration some of the medical techniques need, but you still have to remain aware of your surroundings. You can't do much if you're dead, can you?" "No," he admitted. This was the second time in so many days he got surprised and he was feeling really ashamed of himself. "Fortunately I'm not an enemy. I just came to see how were you doing." Naruto grimaced. "I feel like I'm making no progress at all." "What's the problem?" she inquired. "What?" the boy blinked. "I asked what the problem was, maybe I could help," Shizen elaborated. "Why?" he asked with suspicion in his voice. "So you can win," she explained like he should have already known it. "I know, but why?" "So we can all return to Konoha." "Oh. You mean you can't return if I don't win?" Naruto questioned. She sighed. "My place is with Tsunade-sama." "Doesn't she want to return to Konoha as well?" the boy asked. "Tsunade-sama?" Shizun nearly laughed. "Never." "Then why did she make the bet?" "She loves betting." "I noticed, but why did she set such stakes?" "She could have wagered anything, but she bet she'd return to Konoha." "That means she does want to return, at least a part of her does," the boy explained his reasoning. "You don't know Tsunade-sama as well as I do," the woman disagreed. "She hates Konoha." "But why would she make the bet then?" Naruto's face scrunched in concentration. "She must be prepared to lose." "Tsunade-sama?" Shizen shook her head. "She always believes she'd win." "That makes no sense." The Chunin shook his head. "She is known as the legendary sucker far and wide." "Well, it doesn't," the dark-haired medic shrugged. "A lot of things make no sense." "Yeah, I noticed," the boy grimaced. "So back to the original question, do you need help?" "Some help would be welcome," he admitted. "Only I don't see what you can do." "It's just a matter of concentration." "I know a lot about concentration," Shizen answered. "I believe I already told you. Medical ninjutsu are based on it." "Oh, sorry." Naruto gave her an embarrassed grin. "There's no need to apologize," the healer smiled warmly. "So how are you with your control?" "Well," he scratched his head, "it always gave me trouble, but I train it a lot so it's okay, I guess." "But this seems like a jutsu that needs more than just okay control," Tsunade's assistant pointed out. "Yes, it seems so," the Chunin agreed. "I can teach you some advanced control exercises," Shizun offered. "That would be nice, but do you think I can master in time and still master the Rasengan?" Well, the medic thought back to how long it took her to master them and she had been older than Naruto at the time. "I thought so," the blonde sighed. "There just isn't enough time, is there?" "A week really isn't a long time," she admitted. "It's only 6 days now," Naruto corrected. "But it doesn't matter. Can you show me the exercises anyway? Maybe it will help. And if not, well," he shrugged, "at least I would learn something new." "You have a point," Shizen smiled. "Let's start." Do you know the needle balancing exercise? The evening it was nearly dusk and Naruto was still sitting on the porch, spinning chakra in his hand. He was feeling tired, but he refused to quit. There was so much to do yet. The exercises Shizune had shown him were really interesting and he would remember them for later. He had the Rasengan to concentrate on. But learning better concentration would help, the healer was right about it. If he could only do both at once, but that would require shadow clones, which would require the use of hand seals, which would require using his injured arm, and that was something Tsunade had expressly forbidden if he wanted it to heal anytime soon. But he really needed the extra help if he wanted to win the bet, and he did. So maybe once wouldn't hurt? He looked around, checking whether someone was observing him. He felt a bit stupid doing it. Should he be afraid of his own allies? But he was glad when he wounded nobody familiar. Not that he would spot them if they didn't want to be spotted, they were too good for that. He brought his uninjured right hand to the injured left one. He winced. It hurt, but he had survived worse. He slowly began forming the necessary seals. It was gratingly sluggish, but his injury didn't allow him to move faster. But it didn't really matter, he was in no rush. He finished and 10 clones appeared around him. He sighed in relief when he could finally let his wounded arm hang on the sling again. You know what to do, he told his clones, and each of them began an exercise from Shizune's arsenal. Some seemed to struggle, because they could use only one arm, but most could train without any trouble. Naruto returned to spinning the Rasengan. He could only hope that the extra control would help. Several days later Tsunade stood silently as she watched the blonde brat train. She had to admit she was impressed with his determination, if nothing else. Every time she came to check on him, he was training. And she had to admit, he was making progress. It wasn't enough to make it in time in her opinion, but it was far better than she gave him credit for. The concentration and chakra control exercises the clones were working on must be helping. She couldn't even find it in herself to scold him for using his injured hand. When she had checked it yesterday, it had been healing just fine, so there was really no need. In just a few days, the boy would be fully healed and they would be on their merry way, never to see each other again. Tsunade sighed. She felt a pang of some unpleasant emotion at that thought, she didn't bother to analyze which one. But she had no reason to be unhappy, right? Sure, seeing Jiraiya again had brought back some unpleasant memories, but they tended to pop up on their own from time to time, so it was really nothing new. And soon everything was going to be just like it used to. Then what reason she had to feel uncomfortable? Then a traitorous thought entered her mind. Maybe she didn't want everything to get back to the old status quo. Well, of course she didn't. If she could return time to when Dan and Nawaki were still alive, then she would be happy, but she realized the impossibility of such occurrence. Getting back to wandering the world with Shizune was all she had to look forward to. Only she wasn't really looking forward to it. I'm getting all mushy today, she thought. She had noticed before that the blonde brat bore certain similarities with her late brother. It hurt her, but it also comforted her. Even Jiraiya reminded her of the good old times before everything went to hell. She realized that she didn't want the week to end, she wanted to spend more time around them. But they would only try to drag her back to Konoha, and there was no way she was returning there. The pain was still too sharp, even after so many years have passed. And she didn't want to lose anyone else again. She had only Shizune left now and she couldn't imagine what she would do without her. And she was sure that Konoha would take her away eventually, and probably in some gruesome manner, because they were in war after all. But maybe things would be different this time? Nah, she shook her head fiercely. Even the legendary sucker wouldn't bet on such odds. But what was she to do? Wait for Naruto to fail, pack her things, leave and drink to forget? What else could she do? She sighed and returned to her silent observation. With Naruto the boy sighed. He was making progress, but it was too slow. Only 2 days remained until the deadline, and he could already tell that he wasn't going to make it at this pace. He spun the ball of chakra on his palm again. There were much less strands trailing behind it now, but that was still too much. He scowled. He wished he could just swat them away, and he would have done so, if he could. But his left arm was still in a cast. He scowled deeper. Stupid Tsunade. First she breaks his arm and then she makes that bet, which would have been hard to complete even if he were able to perform to his full capacity. Damn it, this way it looked like the legendary sucker was actually going to win a gamble. And because that would mean he would lose, he was determined not to let it happen. But what could he do? Something bothering you, boss? One of his clones asked while balancing a sunbon needle on each of his fingertips. I just can't get it right, the original Naruto complained. I see. Well, at least I'm doing well, look, he boasted just as the needles fell. Or maybe not so well, the original chuckled. Sorry, the clone grinned sheepishly. Nothing makes a person as happy as seeing another's misfortune, the original said. Only you aren't really someone else. Yes, it looks like we both suck, the clone nodded philosophically. Or should I say you suck twice? You shouldn't say anything or I'm going to dispel you, the original threatened. Maybe it would improve your control enough to actually do it, the clone suggested half sarcastically. Maybe, the original Naruto sighed. I just want to beat that stupid ball until it works right, but I have only one arm. I think if you really tried to beat it, then you would really have just one arm afterwards, boss, the clone pointed out. I know, the original nodded. But I still wish I could go at it with 2 hands. You have 1 hand, I have 1 hand, that means we have 2 hands together. And because I am you, that means you have 2 hands. You're crazy, the original shook his head. Are you really me? I am, the clone nodded. And if I am crazy, that means you are too. Don't even remind me. But, hey. That's an idea. What? The clone tried in vain to figure out what did his creator mean by it. That you have 1 hand and you have 1 hand, that means we have 2 hands together. Sure, the clone scratched his head, still not getting it. You'll lend me your hand and we'll do it together. You know that if you take my hand I'll dispel, the clone asked. I don't mean that, silly, the original reassured him. Honestly, are you even me? I'm sure I'm not that dumb. I'm not so sure. Seriously, don't push it or I'll really pop you and make a new one, Naruto threatened. I'm quiet now, the clone threw up his healthy arm defensively. So what's your plan? I'll form a Rasengan and you try to keep that strands under control. Got it? I think so. But how do you figure out I should do it? I thought so, the clone smirked. You have no idea. I already told you to shut up. Let's just do it and we'll figure it out on the go. That's what we are best at, isn't it? Of course. It healed well, Tsunade stated when she concluded the examination of Naruto's arm. Now hold still for a while longer, I'm going to remove the cast. Thanks, Tsunade-bachan, Naruto grinned. I couldn't stand it. How did you just call me? A vein pulsed in her brow. Watch it or I'll give you a reason to wear it for another month. The boy grimaced. A week had been bad enough. A month, he didn't even want to imagine it. He stayed silent as the legendary medic removed the bandages from his arm. When she finished, he sighed in relief. He flexed his muscles experimentally. Not so fast, Tsunade berated him. You don't want to tear something so soon after healing, do you? But it was just too good a feeling to be finally able to move his arm freely. It's all fine, he grinned. You are the best healer after all. That I am, she grinned back, so don't mess up my work. I won't, he promised. Or do you think I like being all bandaged up? Gaki, you haven't been all bandaged up yet, she reminded him. Yes, that's true, he nodded. My best attempt was 3/4. That aside, do you remember what day is today? Yes, the boy nodded in apprehension. You don't look too sure of yourself, the woman observed. Could it be that you haven't completed the jutsu yet? I still have until sunset, he blurted out. Oh, she raised an eyebrow. I suppose you do. Our bet didn't state what time today you have to show it. But honestly, do you think you can complete it in, she looked at the position of the sun, 5 hours? That's not much time. Better show me now and spare yourself the anxiety. Or can't you do it? You bet I can, he boasted, despite feeling quite unsure. I think not, she shook her head. I've already bet you can't do it, remember? I do, he nodded. But if you bet that I can do it, you'd win for sure. Tsunade laughed. That won't be much of a bet. So can you do it or not, she prompted. I don't have a whole day for you. You don't, he questioned. What's so important you have to do it today? Stuff. Stuff? The boy asked skeptically. Yes, stuff, she answered in a tone that said don't ask. Even Naruto got it. Okay, he nodded. Here it goes. He joined his hands in the ram seal and created a clone. Kage Bunshin? Tsunade raised an eyebrow. That looks nothing like the Rasengan. I know, he nodded. I'm getting to it right away. I'm waiting, she prompted. Naruto took a deep breath and closed his eyes for a moment to compose himself. He had made great progress in the last 2 days, but he still couldn't eliminate the stray strands completely. But he almost had it. Sometimes, for a moment the Rasengan looked perfect before some of the chakra strayed from its intended path again. He could only do his best and hope it would be good enough for Tsunade. He extended his palm upwards and spun the vortex of chakra in it. It quickly formed into a ball with strands of chakra trailing behind it. The clone extended his hand over it, adjusting the flow of chakra so that the strands would disappear. But it still wasn't perfect. There were still strands trailing behind and there were more of them than the last time he tried. Damn it, he was so worried about the bet he couldn't concentrate properly. And Tsunade looked just about ready to call him a loser. And that just wouldn't do. If he just had another hand to wait, he did. After a week, he could finally use his left hand too. He quickly brought it to the sphere, the clone mirroring his action. Together they shaped the chakra in the jutsu, eliminating the strands completely. They held it that way for about 2 seconds before letting it dissipate. Naruto dismissed the clone and turned to Tsunade with a victorious smirk. So how did you like it? She didn't look happy. Well, though I have to admit that you made a perfect Rasengan for a while, I honestly cannot say you completed it. What? The boy blinked in shock. Why? She lifted her hand and started counting the reasons on her fingers. For once, you needed a clone to form it. That's too inconvenient in battle. Second, you needed both hands to form it and both of the clone's hands. True Rasengan is formed with just one hand. Oh come on, I formed it, didn't I? Naruto whined in dismay. 3, she continued. When you formed the sphere, it was completely surrounded by your hands. That means you couldn't smash it into anything. Therefore it's useless. I can remove the extra hands before I attack, he objected. Oh, I'm sure you can, but can you keep the chakra properly concentrated afterwards? I thought so, she nodded. You can't. I'm sorry but it looks like you lost. It's not evening yet, he reminded her. And you think you can improve before then? Well, she shrugged, I can wait for you to make a fool of yourself again. I won't, he assured her. I will do it. Strong words, boy, but I doubt you will be able to back them up. Either you can perform the Rasengan with just one hand before evening comes, or I'm going to be rid of you and that old toad for good. Oh, come on, Heim, don't be so harsh, a familiar voice sounded from nearby. Tsunade sharply looked around. Her eyes narrowed in irritation. Jiraiya. How long have you been here? I just arrived, the hermit answered. And you have to agree that the boy did form a perfect Rasengan. You're just grasping for straws so you won't have to come with us. You're the one grasping at straws to make me return, she shot back. That's not true, the toad sage defended. It is, and don't try to deny it, she snapped back. Then I'll just have to learn to make the Rasengan with fewer hands before evening, Naruto interjected. Don't be ridiculous, Tsunade scoffed. There's just no way you can make it. Wait and see, Bachan. He made the familiar cross seal. Kage Bunshin, a whole army of his copies appeared around him. Now this gives me a lot of extra training time. There's just more of you to do it wrong the same way, she opposed. What do you know? He shrugged. Come back this evening and see for yourself. I will, she promised. And now excuse me, I have to pack. Do so, because you're going with us. Naruto called after her retreating back. In your dreams. Tsunade's in, so did he make it? Shizun asked when her mistress returned. No, the Sannin replied. He insists he still have time until sunset, but there's no way he's going to make it. I see, her assistant replied, looking at the ground. What is it, Shizun? Tsunade asked upon seeing her apprentice so downtrodden. Nothing, Tsunade-sama. Don't give me that. I can't remember the last time I've seen you so down. What is it? Shizun didn't answer. Did you want him to win? The younger woman averted her eyes. I just hoped I could see Konoha again. It's been so long. You can go with them if you want, the legendary medic offered. I don't hold you here. No, Shizun shook her head, my place is with you, Tsunade-sama, wherever you go. You look sad, the older woman remarked. It's nothing. It doesn't look like nothing. It really is nothing, Shizun shook her head. Let's just pack. Tsunade didn't answer. She just stood there, observing her apprentice with a pensive look on her face. The Naruto dismissed the clones one by one, slowly absorbing their memories. One look at the sky showed him that sundown was very close now. Only minutes remained before the shining orb would touch the horizon and the time would be up. It was both too soon and not soon enough. He was nearly exhausted now. All the training drained his chakra faster than even Kyubi could replenish it. If he had to do another half hour of it, he would have collapsed. But now was the time to examine the results of his training. He extended his right palm, spinning the chakra in it. It was better than his previous attempts, but still not good enough. He helped it with his other hand. The jutsu improved immediately, but it still wasn't a perfect sphere. He gave up, let the technique dissipate and created a clone. Using 3 hands, he could form a perfect Rasengan, but that was still using 2 hands too many. He sighed. Tsunade would never accept that as a completed jutsu and he couldn't argue with her. This way it was really useless in a battle. He looked at the sky again. The sun had already disappeared behind the nearby buildings, but their roofs were still illuminated by its rays. He had merely minutes before Tsunade would show up. There was no way he could complete the jutsu in that time. Don't be so down, Jiraiya tried to cheer him. You came much further than I expected. I'm sure soon you'll be able to do the Rasengan no problem. But we're still going to lose the bet, the boy reminded him. So what? The sage shrugged. I never counted on you winning anyway. I'll find another way to convince Tsunadeheim to return. In fact, I'm already working on something. He winked conspiratorially. Really? The boy asked skeptically. Really, the porn writer confirmed. What do you think I've been doing the whole week? Peeping? Is that what you think of me? Naruto's expression was answer enough. Gaki, in case you haven't noticed it yet, I can do my job if I want to. And how often do you want? More often than you think. That isn't much, Naruto muttered. So what did you do? That I can't say. It wouldn't work if I did. Then how do I know you aren't pulling my leg? You don't, and you don't need to know. Oh, and look, our guests of honor are here. Naruto turned his head to see where Jiraiya was pointing. Sure enough, Tsunade and Shizune were slowly walking to them. He put on his best smile. Or he tried to. It came off as a strained grimace instead. Meanwhile, the two women reached them and stopped. So brat, Tsunade prompted. Show me what you have. Sure, the boy nodded, licking his lips nervously. He showed her his three-handed Rasengan. He feared he wouldn't make even this, being barely able to concentrate, but he managed. What's wrong with me, he thought. I'm usually calmer on battlefield and there's no enemy around here. Yet his heart beat too loudly when he watched Tsunade's face for her reaction. He knew she was going to scorn him again, but he still couldn't help but hope. Well, she said slowly, I guess it will have to do. Yes, he hung his head sadly, I know, what? He blinked in surprise. What did you just say? I said it would have to do, brat, she repeated. Or should I examine your ears? You seem to have some trouble hearing. No, it's just, you said earlier. What's so hard to understand? The slug princess shrugged. I just decided that it was good enough after all. So you are coming back with us? The boy asked. Yes, she confirmed. Thank you. Tsunade-sama, Shizune said tearfully. Don't thank me, the older woman replied. I'm so glad you decided to come, Tsunadeheim, Jiraiya grinned. Konoha's hot springs just weren't the same without you. A vein pulsed in Tsunade's forehead. Jiraiya, she spoke slowly, I agreed to come back, but if you push it, I might still change my decision. And besides, she continued cracking her knuckles, nobody ever said that you have to return too. I'm sorry, he apologized hurriedly. I'm just overjoyed to have my princess back. Well, I suppose I can forgive you this once, she shrugged. You were always a moron. But remember this, I'm not your princess. Whatever you say, Tsunadeheim, the toad sage replied with a face-splitting grin. Whatever you say. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. Guys, make sure to help the author by visiting the link in the description. This is Fox Sage, and I'm signing off.